Hey guys, tonight we waking up slowly on a Sunday morning when you were small, when the light coming through your curtains was golden and soft, when there was no alarm clock screaming at you, when the whole day stretched ahead like an ocean you could wade into at your own pace, and the only thing you had to do was nothing at all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're rewatching from and what time it is. I love seeing where these stories find you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. There's something your brain remembers about Sunday mornings in childhood, something that lives deeper than memory, something that exists in your body as much as your mind. It's the feeling of waking up and knowing, before you even opened your eyes, that today was different. Today was Sunday. Today was slow. Today was yours. You stirred first. Not quite awake, but not quite asleep either, floating in that liminal space where dreams and reality blur together like watercolors. Your bedroom was dim but not dark, the curtains probably thin, probably a pattern you'd long since stopped noticing were doing their best to filter the morning sun. But light was seeping through anyway, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. The quality of Sunday morning light was different from weekday light. This isn't nostalgia talking, this is physics mixed with perception. On weekdays, you were rushed, yanked from sleep by alarms or parents' voices, your eyes forced to adjust quickly to brightness and urgency. But on Sunday, you woke gradually, naturally, your pupils dilating slowly, your visual cortex easing into consciousness. The light had time to be gentle, and your brain, given this gift of slow awakening, recorded it differently, softer, warmer, safer. Some psychologists argue that our perception of time is deeply influenced by our emotional state and the presence or absence of urgency. When we're rushed, time compresses. When we're relaxed, it expands. And Sunday mornings, those glorious obligation-free Sunday mornings of childhood, were the epitome of expanded time. They were time made elastic, stretched like taffy, infinite in the way only childhood moments can be infinite. You could hear sounds from elsewhere in the house, soft sounds, unhurried sounds. Maybe the distant clank of a pan in the kitchen, maybe the low murmur of your parents' voices, pitched quiet because they knew you were still sleeping, or at least they thought you were. Maybe the faint whistle of a kettle, or the creak of a floorboard, or the rustle of a newspaper being unfolded. These sounds didn't disturb you. They did the opposite. They cocooned you, wrapped you in the knowledge that the house was awake and tending to itself, that adults were handling adult things, that you were safe and small, and had nowhere to be, and nothing to prove. Your body was doing something interesting in these moments, something researchers, studying sleep and circadian rhythms, have only recently begun to understand. You were experiencing what is called a natural wake window, your body emerging from sleep, not because of external demands, but because it had completed its sleep cycles naturally. Your cortisol was rising gently, not spiking with alarm clock panic. Your body temperature was gradually increasing. Your brainwaves were shifting from delta to theta to alpha in a smooth, unhurried progression. This is how humans are supposed to wake up. This is what our bodies were designed for, but most of us haven't experienced it since childhood, since those Sunday mornings when time was a gift rather than a master. You stretched, slowly, feeling the weight of your blanket, the softness of your pillow, the way your joints and muscles responded to movement after hours of stillness. Everything felt good, everything felt easy. Your body was rested in a way that went beyond physical. It was emotionally rested, mentally rested, existentially rested. Here's a curious thing about childhood rest. Researchers studying developmental psychology have found that children who experience regular periods of unstructured, unhurried time show better emotional regulation, stronger creativity, and more resilient stress response systems. The brain needs these pauses. It needs these mornings of nothing. Not as a luxury, but as a fundamental requirement for healthy development. You were getting smarter, more balanced, more yourself, simply by lying there in that golden light, doing absolutely nothing. The smell reached you before you were fully conscious of it. Something cooking, something sweet and warm. Pancakes maybe, or French toast, or whatever your family's Sunday breakfast tradition was. The smell wasn't strong or intrusive. It was just there, threading through the air, making the house feel even more like home, making the morning feel even more like Sunday. Your stomach responded lazily, not with urgent hunger but with gentle interest. You weren't starving. You'd eat when you got up, whenever that was. There was no rush. Some neuroscientists study what they call olfactory memory, the way smells can trigger incredibly vivid and emotional memories. The olfactory bulb, which processes smell, has direct connections to the amygdala and hippocampus, the brain regions responsible for emotion and memory. This is why a particular scent can instantly transport you back to childhood, can make you feel things you haven't felt in decades. That Sunday morning smell, whatever it was in your house, is in your brain right now, filed away, preserved, and somewhere, deep in your neural networks, it's still connected to this feeling: safe, loved, unhurried, home. You opened your eyes fully, now blinking at the golden light, at the familiar shapes of your room, your dresser, your bookshelf, your pile of stuffed animals or action figures, or whatever constellation of objects populated your childhood space. Everything looked softer in Sunday morning light, gentler, like the edges had been sanded down. There was no school tomorrow. This thought arrived like a gift you'd forgotten you'd been given. No school tomorrow meant no homework, urgency today. No school tomorrow meant today could unfold however it wanted to unfold. No school tomorrow meant you were standing at the beginning of 2 full days of freedom, and this first morning of those 2 days was pure, untouched, full of possibility. Time perception in childhood is a fascinating subject. A week felt like a month, summer vacation felt like a year, and Sunday morning felt like it could last forever. Some researchers attribute this to the way children process novelty. Every experience is newer, richer, more detailed, so the brain encodes more memories, making time feel longer in retrospect. But there is another factor too. The absence of time pressure itself actually changes how we experience duration. When you're not checking the clock, not rushing toward the next thing, not parceling out minutes and hours, time stops behaving like a finite resource and starts behaving like an atmosphere you're simply existing within. You heard a sound, you recognized the television, turned on, low, in the living room. Cartoons probably, or whatever weekend morning programming your family defaulted to. The sound was muffled by walls and distance, but you could make out the bright animated voices, the musical interludes, the laugh tracks or sound effects that signaled this is leisure time, this is playtime, this is time that doesn't count toward anything except enjoyment. Some psychologists argue that the rituals and rhythms of childhood, like Sunday morning cartoons, like family breakfasts, like the predictable sequence of weekend mornings, provide essential scaffolding for emotional development. They create a sense of security, of order, of this is how our family works. These patterns become the template for comfort, the standard against which all future experiences of home and safety will be measured. You weren't thinking any of this. Of course, you were just lying there, cozy and warm, listening to the house be alive around you, feeling the Sunderness of it all seep into your bones. Your blanket was the perfect weight, not too heavy, not too light. It had probably been washed recently. You could tell by the particular softness, the slight fluffiness of fabric that had been tumbled dry and then settled onto your bed in layers. You pulled it up higher, just to your chin, creating a little nest of warmth and comfort. There's a German word Geborgenheit that does untranslate perfectly into English, but means something like a feeling of security, comfort, and being sheltered from harm. It's the feeling of being completely safe, completely cared for, wrapped up in a protective cocoon where nothing bad can reach you. That's what Sunday mornings felt like. Pure Geborgenheit. Your mind was doing that thing it does in the morning, wandering, drifting, touching on thoughts without committing to them. You thought about yesterday maybe, some highlight from Saturday that made you smile. You thought about later today, vague plans or no plans at all. You thought about nothing in particular, just let your consciousness float. This is what meditation aims for, this exact state of relaxed awareness, thoughts coming and going without attachment, body at rest, mind awake but not working. You were a natural at it. Every child was. You didn't need apps or guided sessions or mindfulness coaches. You just woke up on Sunday morning and existed, perfectly, exactly as you were. Eventually, and there was no telling how long you'd been lying there, 5 minutes, or 30, or an hour, you decided it was time to get up, not because you had to, but because you wanted to, because the house sounded cozy, and breakfast smelled good, and the day was waiting for you, patient and unhurried. You pushed back the covers slowly, savoring the transition from warm to cool air. Your pajamas probably too big, probably soft from countless washes, probably patterned with something you loved. Cartoon characters or sports teams or simple stripes were twisted from sleep. You didn't care. You weren't getting dressed. Not yet. Maybe not for hours. Sunday was a pajama day. Your feet touched the floor, carpet or wood or linoleum, whatever your childhood bedroom had, and you stood, stretched again, yawned hugely. Your hair was probably sticking up in weird directions. Your face probably had pillow creases. You were perfectly imperfect, exactly as a Sunday morning child should be. And you walked toward the door, toward the sounds and smells of your family, toward the living room where cartoons were playing and the couch was waiting, toward the kitchen where breakfast was happening at its own easy pace, toward the rest of this day that felt like it could last forever. But you moved slowly, because that was the rule of Sunday morning, though no one had ever said it out loud. Everything happens slowly on Sunday. Everything gets to take its time, and you breathe, soft as Sunday light now. The hallway between your bedroom and the rest of the house felt different on Sunday mornings, longer maybe, or softer, or just quieter in a way that weekday mornings never were. You walked down it barefoot, your steps making almost no sound, your body still half asleep even though you were technically awake. The walls were familiar in that way. Childhood walls walked this hallway thousands of times, but on Sunday morning it felt new again, or at least interesting. Maybe there were family photos hanging there, faces frozen in various stages of your family's history. Everyone smiling in that way. People smile for cameras. Maybe there was wallpaper with a pattern you traced with your eyes, since you were too small to walk. Maybe it was just plain painted walls, nothing special. But they were your walls, your hallway, the passage between sleep and the day. Some neuroscientists study what's called spatial memory, the way our brains map and remember physical spaces. The hippocampus creates what researchers call cognitive maps, internal representations of the places we inhabit. And childhood spaces, the house you grew up in, the hallways you walked every day, are mapped with incredible detail and emotional resonance. Years later, decades later, you could walk this hallway in your mind with your eyes closed and not miss a single step. The morning light was coming from somewhere, a window at the end of the hall maybe, or filtering in from the living room. And it made everything look softer, painted in that same golden quality that had filled your bedroom. Dust motes floated in the air, visible in the angled sunlight, moving so slowly they seemed suspended, timeless. You could hear the television more clearly now. The bright, enthusiastic voices of cartoon characters, the exaggerated sound effects, the musical themes you'd recognize anywhere. These sounds were as much a part of Sunday morning as breakfast smells or soft light. They were the soundtrack to this particular kind of freedom, this particular kind of ease. Here's something curious about childhood television viewing. Researchers studying generational differences in media consumption have found that children who grew up with scheduled programming, shows that came on at specific times, that you had to be present for or you'd miss them, developed different relationship with anticipation and routine than children who grew up with on-demand streaming. Saturday morning cartoons weren't just entertainment, they were ritual, rhythm, something you oriented your morning around. But Sunday morning cartoons were different from Saturday morning cartoons. Saturday still had the faint residue of the week clinging to it, the knowledge that school had just ended, the adjustment period between weekday and weekend. But Sunday was pure weekend. You were already settled into leisure. You were already comfortable. The cartoons were just background music to the larger experience of doing absolutely nothing. You turned the corner, and there it was, the living room, the couch, the TV glowing in the corner, and probably one or both of your parents, settled into their own Sunday morning routine. Your dad with his coffee and newspaper maybe, your mum folded into the armchair with her own mug of something warm. They looked up when you appeared, smiled that soft morning smile that said, "No rush, sweetheart, come sit, be cozy." Some psychologists argue that the quality of family mornings, particularly unhurried, warm, connected mornings, has lasting effects on a child's sense of security and attachment. These aren't dramatic moments. No one's having deep conversations or solving problems. You're just together, present in the same space, comfortable with each other's company. And somehow that's everything. You made your way to your spot on the couch. Because you had a spot, everyone had their spot. These territories were established and respected without ever being officially declared. Maybe you had a favorite cushion that you always sat on. Maybe you had a corner that was perfectly positioned to see the TV. Maybe you draped yourself across the couch in some elaborate configuration of limbs and cushions that only a child's flexible body could achieve. The couch itself was probably well worn, probably had that particular smell and texture of furniture that's been lived on for years. That S absorbed family movie nights and sick days and Sunday mornings until it wasn't just furniture anymore but a member of the household. The cushions had probably lost some of their bounce, had probably developed familiar depressions where bodies regularly rested. This wasn't a showroom couch. This was a working couch, a couch that understood its job and did it well. You settled in, and your body recognized this position, this configuration, this particular way of being. Your muscles relaxed in a way that's specific to truly safe spaces. Your breathing deepened. Your mind shifted from just woke up to now we re-end Sunday morning proper. A subtle but significant transition. On the television, whatever show was playing continued its bright, simple story. The plots were never complicated. Someone needed to learn a lesson, or solve a problem, or go on an adventure that would definitely resolve itself in 22 minutes. The animation was colorful, exaggerated, comforting in its predictability. You'd probably seen this episode before, maybe several times. It didn't matter. The familiarity was part of the comfort. Some researchers studying nostalgia have found that repeated experiences in childhood, like watching the same shows, eating the same breakfasts, following the same Sunday morning routine, create what's called comfort through predictability. Our brains find security in patterns, in knowing what comes next, in the reliability of ritual. These mornings were teaching you that the world could be stable, that some things would always be there, that Sunday would always feel like Sunday. Your dad turned a page of his newspaper, the paper making that distinctive rustling sound. Your mum sipped her coffee, then set it down on the side table with a soft clink. These small sounds were part of the texture of Sunday morning, as much a part of the experience as the cartoons or the sunlight or the smell of breakfast that was still drifting through the house. No one was talking much. There was no need. Conversation on Sunday morning was optional, sparse, comfortable in its absence. If someone said something, it was usually something small, sleep well, or want some juice, or this is a good episode. But mostly there was just shared silence, shared space, shared contentment. The concept of parallel play is usually applied to toddlers, the way young children play near each other without necessarily interacting, deriving comfort from proximity without requiring engagement. But in a way, Sunday morning was parallel play for families. Everyone in their own experience, but together. Everyone doing their own version of nothing, but in the same room. You stretched out further, your body claiming more of the couch, your limbs arranging themselves in whatever configuration felt right. Maybe you grabbed a throw blanket. There was probably one draped over the back of the couch, always available, and pulled it over your lap. Not because you were cold, but because being cozy made everything better. Time was doing that thing it did on Sunday morning, disappearing, not passing quickly, but simply, not mattering. You had no idea if you'd been awake for 10 minutes or 40. You had no idea what time it was. There was no clock visible from where you were sitting, or if there was, you weren't looking at it. Time was irrelevant. Time was paused. Time was taking a Sunday morning of its own. Some philosophers and physicists have long debated the nature of time. Is it a real flowing phenomenon, or is it a human construct, a way our minds organize experience? For a child on Sunday morning, the question was moot. Time simply didn't exist. There was only now, stretching in all directions, infinite, and comfortable, and completely sufficient. Your parents were reading or sipping or occasionally watching the TV, but mostly they seemed to be doing what you were doing, existing, resting in the present moment without any agenda beyond being present. They looked relaxed in a way they didn't look on Wednesday afternoon or Friday morning. They looked like themselves, but softer, gentler, more available even if no one was asking for anything. This is what children need to see. Adults at rest. Adults not rushing, not stressing, not performing productivity. Adults simply being human, being comfortable, being content with stillness. It teaches something no lecture or lesson could teach, that it's okay to rest, that you don't have to earn every moment of peace, that being alive is enough. The cartoon reached some climactic moment, music swelling, characters learning their lesson, everything resolved neatly before the closing credits. Another episode would start soon, or maybe the programming would switch to something else. It didn't matter. You weren't watching for plot. You were watching for the feeling, for the ritual, for the background presence of something cheerful and Your stomach rumbled softly, reminding you that breakfast existed, that eventually you'd move from this couch to the kitchen table, that the day had further chapters to unfold. But there was no urgency even in hunger. Breakfast would happen. It always happened. And when it did, it would be slow and abundant and warm. Another chapter in this day that felt like it could last forever. For now, you just sank deeper into the couch, deeper into the morning, deeper into this feeling that's so hard to find as an adult. Complete, uncomplicated, unhurried peace. And you breathe, slow as Sunday morning. Eventually, inevitably, gently, you were drawn toward the kitchen. Not called, your mum hadn't yelled breakfast yet, but pulled by some combination of hunger and curiosity, and the magnetic force that kitchens have on Sunday mornings when something sweet is being made. You unfolded yourself from the couch, leaving behind the indent your body had made in the cushions, a temporary ghost of where you'd been. Your parents barely looked up, just registered your movement with small smiles, understanding that you were migrating toward food, the way satellites migrate toward planets, naturally, inevitably, following laws of gravity and comfort. The kitchen was the heart of Sunday morning. You were learning. The living room was nice, the couch was cozy, but the kitchen was where the magic was actually happening, where the smells were coming from, where your mom or dad or whoever was on breakfast duty was moving in that calm, unhurried way that Sunday allowed. The light was different in the kitchen, brighter, because kitchens usually had more windows, bigger windows, positioned to catch morning sun. The light poured in through glass and onto countertops, making everything look clean and warm and somehow more alive. Dust motes danced here too, caught in the angular rays, moving to music only they could hear. Some psychologists argue that the kitchen is where children first learn about care, about provision, about love, expressed through action rather than words. Watching a parent cook, seeing the care in how they crack eggs, or flip pancakes or measure coffee, teaches something fundamental about attentiveness, about doing things carefully, because the people you're doing them for matter. Your mom was at the stove, or your dad was, or maybe they were taking turns moving around each other in that practiced dance that couples develop in small kitchens, the choreography of excuse me and behind you, and knowing when to reach for the spatula and when to stay out of the way. The pancakes were piling up on a plate, golden circles, slightly imperfect in that homemade way that's better than perfect. Or maybe it was waffles, crispy-edged and steaming, or French toast, eggy and soft and dusted with cinnamon. Whatever your family's Sunday tradition was, it was happening now, and the smell was extraordinary. Here's something curious about olfactory memory. The scent of cooking breakfast triggers, not just nostalgia but actual physiological responses. Your brain, smelling those familiar breakfast smells, begins preparing your digestive system. Saliva production increases, stomach acid activates, your body readies itself for nourishment. But more than that, those smells trigger the release of dopamine and serotonin, feel-good neurotransmitters associated with comfort and reward. You weren't just smelling breakfast, you were smelling safety, love, home. You probably sidled up to the counter, maybe hopped onto a stool if you were tall enough, maybe just stood there watching, waiting, being present in that way children are present, fully, completely, without the divided attention adults always seem to have. Morning, sleepyhead, someone said, or something like that, some gentle acknowledgement of your arrival. Their voice was still soft, still carrying that Sunday quality, unhurried and warm. Morning, you said back, or maybe you just smiled, or maybe you didn't respond at all because words weren't necessary. Presence was enough. The bacon was sizzling if there was bacon, popping and crackling in its pan, filling the air with that smoky, salty smell that's somehow both comforting and exciting. The coffee maker was gurgling if it hadn't finished already, breathing out its rich, dark aroma that you didn't appreciate yet but would someday. That adult smell that meant morning and alertness and routine. Some neuroscientists study what they call contextual memory encoding, the way our brains bundle together all the sensory inputs of a moment, creating rich multi-layered memories. This kitchen moment wasn't just visual or just olfactory or just auditory. It was all of it at once. The sight of your parent at the stove, the smell of breakfast cooking, the sound of sizzling and coffee brewing, the feel of the cool counter under your elbows, the taste of anticipation in your mouth. All of it was being recorded as a single, complex memory. Sunday morning in the kitchen. You want juice? Someone asked, already reaching for the refrigerator, already knowing the answer, because Sunday morning breakfast always came with juice, orange probably, or apple, poured into a glass that might have had cartoon characters on it, or might have been plain. But either way, it was your glass, the one you always used. You nodded or said yes, or just watched as the juice was poured, thick and cold, bright-colored, catching the sunlight as it filled the glass. These small acts of care, pouring juice, Flipping pancakes, setting the table weren't dramatic. No one was winning awards for Sunday breakfast, but they mattered. They mattered so much. The table was being set, casually, without formality. Plates placed without precise alignment, forks and knives set down more or less where they should be, napkins pulled from the holder. This wasn't a dinner party. This wasn't company. This was just family, just Sunday, just the comfortable imperfection of people who knew each other well enough that nothing needed to be fancy. Some anthropologists studying family rituals have found that informal, repeated meals like Sunday breakfast create stronger family bonds than formal occasions. The very casualness of it, the regularity, the lack of performance, allows family members to be authentically themselves, to relax into each other's presence without the pressure of special occasions. You might have been asked to help. Can you grab the syrup, or put these on the table? Small tasks that made you part of the process, that gave you a role in the creation of this Sunday morning feast. And you did it, happily, feeling useful and included, feeling like you mattered in the making of this moment. The syrup was probably in a squeeze bottle, not a fancy glass pitcher, practical and slightly sticky around the top from previous Sundays. The butter was probably in a dish that had been in your family forever. Nothing special, but everything special, because it was yours. It was familiar. It was part of the texture of home. Everything was ready now, or nearly ready, coming together in that final convergence that happens in kitchens when all the separate tasks align into a meal. The pancakes were stacked. The bacon was drained. The eggs were scrambled, or fried, or however your family did eggs. The juice was poured. The coffee was made. The table was set. "Come eat," someone said, or maybe they didn't say anything. Maybe everyone just gravitated toward the table the way planets return to orbit, pulled by forces stronger than words. You slid into your chair, the one you always sat in, another one of those unspoken family territories that everyone respected. The chair had probably molded to you over years of meals, knew the shape of you, welcomed you back like an old friend. The plate in front of you was empty, waiting. The food was in the middle of the table, ready to be served. And the Sunday morning continued, unhurried and abundant, expanding to fill whatever time it needed, because time, on Sunday morning, was infinite. And you breathe, warm as kitchen light. There was something ceremonial about Sunday breakfast, even though no one would have called it that. Ceremonial makes it sound formal, stiff, religious maybe. But this was ceremony in the truest sense, a repeated ritual, performed with care, marked as different from everyday meals by its abundance and its pace. Your plate was being filled now by your own hand, reaching for pancakes, or by a parent serving you, or some combination, passing dishes around the table in that family choreography you'd performed hundreds of times. First the pancakes, 2 or 3, their surfaces golden and slightly cratered like tiny moons. Then butter, a pat or two, already starting to melt from the heat of the pancakes, creating small pools of yellow gold. The syrup came next, and this was serious business. Not too much, not too little, getting the coverage just right. You probably had a technique spiral from the outside in, or zigzag across the surface, or just a generous pour in the center, and let physics do the rest. The syrup caught the light as it flowed, amber and thick, settling into the craters, running down the sides of the stack, pooling slightly on the plate. Some researchers studying childhood development have noted that meals, particularly slow, pleasant meals, teach children dozens of small skills: fine motor control with utensils, portion control, patience, social interaction, cultural norms. But beyond skills, they teach something harder to quantify: that eating can be joyful, that food can be abundant, that meals can be times of gathering rather than rushing. The first bite was always the best bite. Fork cutting through the stack, catching a bit of everything: pancake, melting butter, syrup, lifting it up, still steaming slightly, bringing it to your mouth. The sweetness hit first, then the butteriness, then the tender texture of the pancake itself, fluffy and substantial. It was perfect. It was exactly what Sunday morning was supposed to taste like. Around the table, everyone was eating, but slowly, talking between bites, pausing to sip juice or coffee, no one in a rush to finish. This was the opposite of weekday breakfast. The toast grabbed on the way out the door, the cereal eaten standing up, the rush to start the day. This was breakfast as experience rather than fuel, as gathering rather than obligation. Your dad might have been reading the newspaper between bites, but not rudely, not ignoring everyone, just multitasking in that gentle Sunday way, part present, and part absorbed in whatever news or sports scores or comic strips the paper offered. Your mum might have been making her own plate, or already eating, or already thinking about seconds, about whether there was enough for everyone to have more. Here's something curious about family meals. Researchers studying attachment theory have found that children who regularly eat meals with their families, particularly meals where conversation flows and the pace is relaxed, show higher levels of emotional well-being and lower levels of anxiety. It's not about the food itself. It's about the gathering, the ritual, the repeated experience of, we are together, we are safe, we have enough. Someone passed you the bacon, and you took a piece, maybe two, crispy and salty and perfect. Or if your family didn't do bacon, maybe it was sausage, or ham, or nothing at all because some families are vegetarian or just prefer their breakfasts simpler. It didn't matter what it was. What mattered was that it was there, offered, shared. The conversation was probably light, easy, the kind of talk that happens when no one has anywhere to be. Someone might have mentioned something they wanted to do later, go to the park, work in the garden, run errands, visit someone, but it was all hypothetical, all soft around the edges, all subject to change based on the mood of the day. These are good, you might have said, gesturing at your pancakes with your fork, giving credit where credit was due, and whoever made them smiled, pleased, said thank you, or said it was easy, or said there's plenty more if you want seconds. This casual exchange of compliments and offers, this easy back and forth of family conversation, was teaching you social skills you didn't know you were learning. How to express appreciation, how to accept compliments, how to be part of a group without dominating or disappearing, how to be yourself in the presence of others who loved you. Some anthropologists studying food culture have noted that many societies around the world have special weekend or holiday breakfasts that differ from everyday meals, bigger, slower, more communal. This isn't just about having more time, it's about marking time as different, about creating pockets of abundance and togetherness that contrast with the normal rush of life. You reached for more syrup, because the first application had been absorbed into the pancakes, soaked up and disappearing, and you wanted that sweet taste restored. This time you poured more generously, less careful about precision, creating a small lake of amber on your plate that you dip each bite into. The juice glass in front of you was half empty now, and someone noticed, asked if you wanted more. You said yes, and the bottle or carton was passed, and you poured your own refill, maybe spilling a little, because precision wasn't your strong suit yet. But no one minded, just handed you a napkin and moved on. Nothing was precious here, nothing was too good to use. The dishes were everyday dishes, durable and slightly mismatched. The cups were regular cups. The table might have had a tablecloth, or might not have, but if it did, it wasn't a fancy one, just something practical and washable. This was real life, real family, real Sunday morning, with all its comfortable imperfection. The window above the sink or beside the table, there was probably a window somewhere nearby, because kitchens usually have windows, was letting in more of that golden morning light. It fell across the table in bands, illuminating dust motes and steam from coffee and the general atmosphere of contentment that was filling the room like another presence. Your legs might have been swinging under the table, not quite reaching the floor. Or maybe they did reach, and you were fidgeting anyway, tapping your heel against the chair leg in a rhythm only you could hear. No one told you to stop. Movement was allowed. Fidgeting was fine. You were a kid on Sunday morning, and the standards were relaxed, and everything was allowed to be exactly as it was. Some psychologists argued that homes where children are allowed to be themselves, to fidget, to be silly, to take up space without constant correction, produce children with stronger self-esteem and clearer sense of identity. You were learning, without knowing it, that you were acceptable as you were, that your presence was welcome, that you belonged at this table, in this family, exactly as you were. Someone laughed at something, maybe a joke someone told, maybe something from the newspaper, maybe just the good feeling of the morning making everything seem lighter. The sound filled the kitchen, bounced off the walls, settled into the air alongside the smell of syrup and coffee and bacon. Laughter at breakfast. What a luxury, what a gift, what a marker of a life being lived well, and you breathe, full and content as Sunday breakfast. The thing about Sunday breakfast was that it never really ended. It just gradually dissolved into the rest of the morning, boundaries blurring, one thing flowing into another without clear demarcation. You finished eating, but you didn't leave the table immediately. You sat, comfortable and full, while others finished their own plates, while conversation continued its lazy drift from topic to topic. Your dad might have gotten up to refill his coffee. Your mum might have started clearing some dishes, but no one was rushing. The clearing of the table, when it happened, would be just as unhurried as the eating had been. This was Sunday's gift, the removal of all pressure, all urgency, all sense that time was a limited resource being spent too quickly. You might have picked up your own plate, carried it to the sink, felt proud of yourself for helping without being asked. Or you might have stayed at the table, pushed your plate away slightly, rested your chin in your hands, watched dust motes dance in the sunlight, let your mind wander wherever it wanted to wander. Some developmental psychologists study what they call unstructured processing time, moments when children aren't engaged in directed activity, but are simply existing, absorbing, integrating. These moments are crucial for cognitive development, for emotional regulation, for the formation of self. And Sunday morning was full of them. These pockets of nothing happening that were actually everything happening. The fullness in your stomach was comfortable, warm, spreading through your body like contentment made physical. You weren't stuffed, weren't uncomfortable, just satisfied, fed, cared for. The biological need for food had been met, yes, but something deeper had been satisfied too. The emotional need for abundance, for provision, for the experience of having enough. Here rests something curious about childhood food experiences. Researchers studying eating disorders and food relationships have found that children who regularly experience meals as pleasant, unhurried, and abundant, without pressure or restriction, develop healthier relationships with food throughout their lives. Sunday breakfast wasn't just feeding your body, it was teaching you that food could be joyful, that eating could be social, that hunger could be satisfied without anxiety or guilt. Someone suggested seconds. Anyone want more? There's plenty, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but the offer itself was comforting. The knowledge that there was plenty, that you could have more if you wanted, that scarcity wasn't something you needed to worry about. The kitchen was warm now, heated by the stove, and the bodies, and the general gathering of family energy. The windows might have been opened slightly, letting in fresh air, letting the morning breeze play with the curtains, bringing in the smell of outside grass, flowers, the neighbor's lawn being mowed in the distance. Sunday morning had sounds from outside too, lazy sounds, a dog barking somewhere down the street, a car passing by slowly, because no one was rushing on Sunday. Even the traffic moved differently. Birds singing their complex songs, marking territory, seeking mates, doing their bird business, while you did your human business of sitting and being full and content. Some ornithologists study what they call the dawn chorus, the symphony of bird songs that peaks in early morning. But Sunday morning bird songs felt different from weekday bird songs, even though the birds didn't know what day it was. Your perception of them was different, relaxed enough to actually hear them, to appreciate the complexity and variety, to let them become part of the morning's texture, rather than just background noise you tuned out. Your parents were talking now, real conversation, the kind that happens when there's time for it. Not about logistics or schedules, or who needed to be where when, just talking about the news maybe, or about someone they knew, or about something they'd been thinking about. The kind of conversation that meanders and doubles back, and doesn't need to arrive anywhere in particular. You weren't really listening to the content, just the sound of it, the rhythm of their voices, the occasional laughter, the comfortable pauses. This was another thing Sunday morning was teaching you, that adults could be relaxed, could be themselves, could have space for thoughts beyond the immediate demands of parenting and working and managing a household. The table had crumbs on it now, syrup drips, the evidence of a meal thoroughly enjoyed. These small messes didn't bother anyone. They'd be cleaned up eventually, when the morning naturally progressed to that point. But for now they were allowed to exist, proof that something good had happened here. Some researchers studying domestic environments have found that homes where small messes are tolerated, where life is allowed to be imperfect, where not everything needs to be pristine all the time, tend to produce children with lower anxiety and greater creativity. The message being sent wasn't chaos is fine, but rather, life happens here, real life. And that's okay. You might have started playing with the syrup left on your plate, drawing designs with your fork, creating abstract art in sticky amber. No one told you to stop. No one said, don't play with your food. Sunday morning rules were different. Everything was allowed to be a little more relaxed, a little more permissive, a little more understanding that children need to play, need to explore, need to interact with their world in ways that don't always make adult sense. The clock on the wall, if you'd looked at it, which you probably did, UNT might have read 9 o'clock, or 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock. It did UNT matter. Time was still irrelevant. The morning was still morning, would be morning for as long as it needed to be morning. The day had no agenda, no schedule, no appointments to keep. This is a sensation that is almost impossible to recapture as an adult. The complete absence of time pressure. No deadline looming, no place you needed to be, no guilt about wasting time, because the whole point of Sunday morning was that time couldn't be wasted. Time was abundant. Time was yours to spend however you wanted, including spending it on absolutely nothing. Some philosophers have argued that our modern anxiety about time, our constant feeling that there's not enough of it, that it's slipping away, that we're always behind, is one of the primary sources of contemporary stress. But as a child on Sunday morning, you didn't know this was something to worry about yet. Time was just there, available, infinite. Your body was starting to feel restless now, not uncomfortable but ready for movement. You'd been sitting for a while, and children's bodies aren't designed for prolonged stillness. The restlessness wasn't unpleasant, it was just energy, life force, the physical manifestation of being young and healthy, and full of breakfast, and ready for whatever came next. But there was no rush to move. You could sit with the restlessness for a few more minutes, let it build gradually, let the transition from sitting and eating to whatever came next happen organically rather than abruptly, and you breathe, patient as Sunday itself. Eventually, naturally, without anyone declaring it, breakfast was over. Not ended but completed, fulfilled, finished, in the way things finish when they've been given enough time and attention. The plates were mostly empty or empty enough. The juice was drunk or nearly drunk. The coffee cups were drained or cooling, no longer interesting. You slid off your chair, feeling the slight stiffness from sitting, feeling your body wake up fully, ready now to move, to do, to be vertical and active. Your parents were standing too, or one was and one wasn't. The choreography of post-breakfast cleanup beginning its familiar dance. Go ahead, we'll clean up, someone said, or maybe no one said it, but you knew it anyway. Knew that kids weren't really expected to help with dishes, not on Sunday, not when the morning was still yours to spend however you wanted. You drifted back toward the living room, back toward the couch that was still warm from where you'd sat before, back toward the television that was still playing its bright, uncomplicated stories. But you didn't feel bound to it, didn't feel like you had to sit and watch. You were just moving through the house, exploring the space you'd explored 1,000 times, seeing it with Sunday morning eyes. Some neuroscientists study what's called environmental psychology, the way physical spaces affect our mood, our behavior, our sense of self, and childhood homes, particularly on leisurely mornings, become laboratories for exploration and comfort. Every room had potential, every space invited interaction. The house wasn't just shelter, it was terrain, adventure, possibility. You might have wandered to your room, pushed open the door to find it exactly as you'd left it. Bed and made pajamas. In a pile or hanging half off a chair, toys or books, or whatever you'd been playing with yesterday still scattered around. The morning light was pouring through your window now, stronger than it had been when you first woke, illuminating everything in that clear, honest daylight that makes even ordinary objects look interesting. Your bed looked inviting even though you weren't tired. The covers twisted and rumpled in that comfortable way that proves someone actually slept there, actually rested there, actually felt safe enough to surrender to sleep. You might have thrown yourself across it, just because you could, just to feel the bounce and softness, just to reassert ownership over this space that was yours. Here's something curious about childhood bedrooms. Researchers studying personal space development have found that having a room of one's own, even a shared room that has a designated your space, is crucial for developing autonomy and self-identity. This room was your territory, your domain, the place where you got to decide how things were arranged, what mattered, what stayed and what went. You looked around, seeing your things with fresh morning eyes. The stuffed animals or action figures lined up on your shelf, the books with their cracked spines and dog-eared pages, the drawings you'd made, maybe taped to the wall, maybe stuffed in a drawer, the clothes hanging in the closet or piled on the floor. All of it was yours. All of it told the story of who you were becoming. Some developmental psychologists argue that the objects children surround themselves with serve as identity anchors, physical representations of their interests, their relationships, their emerging sense of self. You didn't know you were building an identity. You just knew you liked dinosaurs or dolls or cars or books, and so they were here, surrounding you, reflecting you back to yourself. You might have picked something up, a favorite toy, a book you'd read a dozen times. Not because you wanted to play with it right now, but just because it was there, because it felt good in your hands, because it was familiar and comforting, and yours. Or you might have left your room again almost immediately, not finding what you were looking for, even though you didn't know what you were looking for. Just moving through the house the way children move when they're content but restless, satisfied but seeking, happy but unable to sit still. The hallway again, but different now, in full morning light. The bathroom door open, letting out steam from someone's shower. The mirror fogged, the smell of soap and shampoo mixing with breakfast smells. The whole house smelled good, smelled lived in, smelled like Sunday. You passed your parents' room, door ajar. Bed, probably unmade, because Sunday morning extended its permission to be relaxed, even to the adults. Their room always felt slightly mysterious, not forbidden, but definitely theirs. A space you could enter, but didn't quite belong in the way you belonged in your own room. Some attachment theorists study the way children navigate boundaries within the home, understanding which spaces are communal, which are personal, which require permission to enter. Learning these invisible rules, these unspoken understandings, is part of learning how to exist in community, how to respect autonomy while maintaining connection. Back in the living room, the television was still going, but the programming had changed, moved on to whatever came after the cartoons you'd been watching. Your dad was settled in his chair now, newspaper folded to a different section, reading glasses on, looking content and absorbed. Your mom was moving around, tidying slightly, but not seriously. Just keeping things from descending into complete chaos, maintaining that delicate balance between lived in and livable. "What are you going to do today?" she asked, seeing you wander past, probably recognizing the restless energy, the seeking something quality of your movement. You shrugged, or said, "I don't know," because you didn't know, because nothing was planned, because Sunday was open territory, uncharted time, yours to fill however you wanted. "Well, there's no rush to decide," she said, or something like that, giving you permission to keep not knowing, to keep exploring this state of pleasant uncertainty about how the day would unfold. Some psychologists studying childhood agency have found that children who are regularly given unstructured time where they need to figure out for themselves what to do, develop stronger executive function, better problem-solving skills, and more creativity. You weren't just wasting time, you were learning how to structure time yourself, how to generate interest and activity from within, rather than always having it provided externally. You flopped back onto the couch, not to watch TV particularly, but just because it was there, because your body was still in that state of comfortable fullness that made vigorous activity unappealing, but stillness also unsatisfying. You were in between, in the liminal space of Sunday morning, where breakfast was over, but the day proper had unquite begun. The house had its own energy now, different from early morning. The sleepy quiet had given way to gentle activity, to people moving through spaces, to the soft sounds of living water running, pages turning, someone humming absently, the refrigerator humming in response. Outside, the world was waking up too. You could hear it through the windows. More cars now, more lawnmowers, voices calling to neighbors, dogs greeting each other, the general soundtrack of a neighborhood on Sunday morning. Everyone else was having their own version of this. You realized, their own pancakes or waffles, their own couches, their own slow, sweet mornings. Here is something curious about childhood time perception. Researchers have found that children are more present-focused than adults, less capable of long-term planning, but also less burdened by past regrets or future anxieties. Sunday morning, for you, was fully Sunday morning. You weren't worried about Monday yet. You weren't thinking about next week. You were just here, now. In this moment that felt like it could stretch forever, and in a way, it could. It did. Even now, decades later, this morning still exists, somewhere in your neural pathways, preserved, and perfect, ready to be accessed whenever you need to remember what peace felt like, what abundance felt like, what home felt like. You stretched out longer on the couch, claiming more space, your body arranging itself in whatever configuration felt right. Your eyelids felt heavy, even though you weren't tired. Just content, just full, just experiencing that particular Sunday morning drowsiness that comes from being warm and fed and safe, and you breathe, soft and slow as Sunday morning light. The house on Sunday morning became a kind of map, and you were the explorer, charting familiar territories with fresh appreciation. Each room had its own atmosphere, its own quality of light, its own Sunday morning character. The living room was central, social, the place where family gathered and TV played, and the couch provided its reliable comfort. But other rooms called to you too, inviting exploration even though you knew them by heart. Even though nothing about them had changed since yesterday. You might have wandered to the back door, pressed your face against the screen, looked out at the backyard that was yours but somehow different in Sunday morning light. The grass was probably longer than it should be. Saturday's mowing had unhappened or had been postponed, because weekends were for leisure, not obligation. The grass would get cut eventually, probably this afternoon, probably by your dad, who would push the mower in careful rows while you played nearby, or helped, or at least stayed within shouting distance. But for now, it was just grass, tall and green, maybe wet with dew still, glittering where the sunlight caught the moisture. Maybe there were toys scattered out there, a bike left lying down, a ball abandoned mid-game, chalk drawings on the driveway fading but still visible, ghosts of yesterday's play. Some environmental psychologists studied the importance of outdoor access for children, how having a yard, having safe outdoor space, affects development and well-being. That backyard was more than just grass and fence. It was freedom, adventure, possibility. It was where you could be loud, could run, could dig and build and destroy and create without worrying about making a mess. But Sunday morning was still indoor time, still quiet time, still that gentle space between sleep and full activity. The backyard would wait. It always did. You turned away from the door, moved through the house again, your bare feet making soft sounds on the floor, carpet in the living room, cold tile in the kitchen, wood or linoleum in the hallway. The different textures were pleasant, varied, part of the sensory experience of being home. The bathroom called to you, or you called to it, some biological need, reminding you that bodies require maintenance even on leisurely mornings. You pushed open the door, found the small room bright with morning light from the frosted window, clean and familiar, and yours, were shared with siblings, if you had them, but still fundamentally yours, in the way home spaces are yours. Here's something curious about childhood bathroom memories. Researchers studying domestic spaces have found that bathrooms often feature prominently in people's earliest memories of home. Perhaps because they raise spaces of privacy and autonomy, where even small children get to close the door, to be alone, to manage their own bodies. Or perhaps because they're sensory-rich environments, the sound of water, the smell of soap, the visual interest of tiles and mirrors, and that particular quality of bathroom light. You'd probably studied yourself in the mirror for a moment, seeing what Sunday morning you looked like, hair probably sticking up in interesting directions, face still soft with the remains of sleep, eyes bright and content. You looked like yourself but softer, less guarded, the version of you that only family saw, the private you that didn't need to perform or impress. Some psychologists studying self-concept development have noted that mirrors play a crucial role in how children develop their sense of self, literally seeing themselves, recognizing themselves, building the internal image of "this is me" that becomes so fundamental to identity. But these casual, unself-conscious glances were different from studied poses. This was just checking in, just affirming your own existence in that space. You washed your hands because you'd been taught to, the water cold at first, then warming, the soap making satisfying bubbles that smelled like whatever brand your family bought, probably something simple and clean and inoffensive. The towel was soft, probably slightly damp from earlier use, smelling of fabric softener and family. These small rituals of hygiene were being encoded in your brain as normal, as necessary, as the baseline for self-care. Sunday morning was teaching you that taking care of your body was part of life, not a chore but just what you did, as natural as eating or sleeping. Back in the hallway, you could hear sounds from different parts of the house now. The washing machine starting up maybe, that familiar rumble and slosh of laundry being done because even on Sunday, some things needed doing. The sound wasn't intrusive. It was comforting, proof that the house was functioning, that adults were managing the invisible work of keeping a home running. Some sociologists studying domestic labor have noted that children often do notice or appreciate the work that goes into maintaining a home. The cooking, cleaning, laundry, all the tasks that happen in the background. You weren't thinking about it consciously, but you were absorbing it, learning from observation what it meant to keep a household, what care looked like in practice. You passed through the dining room if your house had one, or the eating area that wasn't quite the kitchen but wasn't quite the living room either. The table was cleared now, clean or mostly clean. The evidence of breakfast removed, except maybe for a forgotten napkin or a crumb or two that would be noticed and wiped up eventually. The chairs were pushed in, or not quite pushed in, arranged in that casual way that suggests recent use but not formal hosting. This was everyday furniture, working furniture. Furniture that understood its job was to be comfortable and functional, not decorative. Your house on Sunday morning felt bigger than it did on other days. You were noticing the same square footage, the same rooms, but somehow more spacious, more accessible, less crowded with urgency and obligation. This was time doing its magic again, expanding to fill available space, making even familiar places feel new. Some architects and designers study what they call psychological space, the way our perception of physical space is influenced by our emotional state, our time pressure, our sense of freedom or constraint. The house didn't change on Sunday. You changed. Your perception changed. Your experience of the space changed. You ended up back in your room, drawn there by some gravitational pull, some need to touch base with your own space, your own things, your own territory. The bed was still unmade, still inviting. The toys were still scattered. The morning light was still pouring through the window, but from a slightly different angle now. The sun having moved in its arc across the sky, marking the passage of time you weren't paying attention to. You sat on the floor, or on your bed, or in whatever space felt right, and just existed, not playing yet, not reading yet, not doing anything specific, just being present in your own space, in your own Sunday morning, in your own life. And this, too, was perfect. This, too, was enough. And you breathe, certain as your own heartbeat. Time on Sunday morning moved differently than time on other days. This wasn't imagination or nostalgia. This was real, measurable. The way your brain encoded the experience. When you're not checking clocks, not counting down to obligations, not measuring your life in scheduled increments, time becomes something else entirely. It becomes atmosphere. It becomes the medium you move through rather than the master you serve. You were lying on your bedroom floor now, or maybe sitting cross-legged on your bed, or sprawled in some configuration only a child's flexible spine could achieve comfortably. The position didn't matter. What mattered was the quality of the moment, unhurried, unplanned, open to whatever might happen next, or might not happen at all. Some cognitive scientists study what they call temporal perception, how we experience the passage of time, how this changes based on age, attention, emotion, and engagement. Children experience time more slowly than adults, partly because everything is newer to them, partly because their ratio of consciousness to lived years makes each moment proportionally larger, but also because they haven't yet been trained to parcel time into productive units. Sunday morning was teaching you that time could be experienced rather than managed, that hours could pass without being accounted for, that you didn't need to justify or explain or even remember exactly how you spent every minute, because the point wasn't productivity. The point was existence, presence, the simple act of being alive and unhurried. You might have picked up a book, one you'd read before, comfortable and familiar. The act of reading on Sunday morning was different from reading at other times. There was no "you should be reading" pressure, no countdown to bedtime, no sense that this was productive time use. You were reading because you wanted to, because the story called to you, because the words and pictures provided a pleasant way to pass time that didn't need passing, just needed experiencing. The book probably had worn corners, a cracked spine, that particular smell that books develop when they've been read and reread, handled and loved. Maybe it was a story about adventure, or animals, or magic, or some combination of all three. The content mattered less than the feeling. The comfort of familiar narrative, the pleasure of words arranged beautifully, the way a good story could transport you while also keeping you right where you were safe in your room, on your floor, on your Sunday morning. Here's something curious about childhood reading. Researchers studying literacy development have found that children who read for pleasure, not for assignments, not for rewards, but simply because they enjoy it, develop stronger comprehension, skills, broader vocabularies, and more sophisticated emotional intelligence. You weren't studying, you were just reading, but you were learning anyway, absorbing lessons about language and story and human experience without even realizing it. The house sounds continued around you, through the walls, under the door, someone walking down the hallway, the toilet flushing, a door closing, a phone ringing, the landline probably, that actual physical phone that lived in the kitchen or living room, that rang with a sound you'd recognize anywhere. Someone answering it, voice muffled by distance, having a conversation you couldn't quite make out and didn't need to. These sounds weren't intrusive. They were company. They were proof that you weren't alone, even when you were alone. That family existed just beyond your door, that you could be private while still being connected. That solitude and belonging weren't opposites, but could coexist comfortably. Some developmental psychologists study what is called secure base behavior, the way children with strong attachments can confidently explore their environment and themselves because they know they have a safe base to return to. Your room was your exploration space, but your family was your secure base. You could be alone here because you knew you weren't really alone. You could close your door because you knew it could be opened. You could be yourself because you knew yourself was acceptable. You set the book down, not finished with it, but finished for now. Attention moving on to something else, or nothing else. Just wandering the way Sunday morning attention was allowed to wander. Outside your window, you could hear the world continuing. A neighbor's lawnmower starting up, that particular sound of summer weekends, the smell of cut grass beginning to drift through your open window, someone laughing, a car door slamming, a basketball bouncing on pavement, the soundtrack of a neighborhood on Sunday, everyone having their own version of leisurely morning, everyone moving at their own Sunday pace. You went to your window, looked out at your street, your small piece of world. The houses were familiar, unchanging, solid and safe. You knew who lived in each one, knew which kids were potential playmates, knew which yards had dogs to avoid or cats to pet, knew the geography of your immediate universe with the certainty that comes from daily observation. This neighborhood was your first experience of community, of being part of something larger than your family, but smaller than the whole overwhelming world. Some sociologists studying childhood development have noted that the decline of neighborhood play, kids out on their own moving between houses and yards, creating spontaneous games and rules, has had profound effects on how children learn social skills and develop independence. But on this Sunday morning, the neighborhood was alive with that older pattern. Kids were emerging from their houses, finding each other, beginning the casual negotiations of play. You could join them later if you wanted, or not. The choice was yours, and the choice having no wrong answer was part of Sunday's gift. You turned from the window, surveyed your room again, seeing it with that particular vision that comes when you're not looking for anything specific. Your eyes touched on objects, lingered, moved on. That poster on the wall, that stack of comics, that jar of interesting rocks or shells or buttons, or whatever small treasures you'd collected, that shoebox under the bed that contained something important, or had once contained something important, or might someday contain something important. Here's something curious about childhood collections. Researchers studying cognitive development have found that the urge to collect, categorize, and curate objects is a fundamental part of how children make sense of their world. You weren't just hoarding random stuff. You were building taxonomy, creating order, establishing what mattered and why, practicing the cognitive skills you'd use for the rest of your life. Time had passed. You didn't know how much. The angle of light through your window had shifted slightly. The sounds from the house had changed. Maybe your parents had moved outside to work in the yard, or were settled in with their own Sunday activities. The morning was moving forward, progressing through its natural stages, unhurried but not static. You felt the pull to move again, to leave your room, to see what else the house and the day might offer. Not because you were bored. Boredom wasn't quite the right word for this restless contentment, this satisfied seeking. Just because you were young and alive, and Sunday morning was still happening, and who knew what the next hour might bring. And you breathe, boundless as Sunday itself. Your room, as comfortable as it was, couldn't hold you forever. The restlessness was building again, not anxious, not uncomfortable, just the natural urge to move that lives in children's bodies like a second heartbeat. You stood, stretched, felt your spine realign, your muscles wake up fully. The hallway greeted you again, familiar and patient. How many times had you walked this hallway in your life? Hundreds, thousands, every morning, every night, countless trips to the bathroom or kitchen or parents' room. It was muscle memory. This path, encoded so deeply you could walk it in complete darkness without touching a wall. Some neuroscientists study what they call spatial memory and place cells, specialized neurons in the hippocampus that fire when we re in specific locations, creating an internal GPS of the places we know. Your childhood home was mapped in your brain with extraordinary detail. Each room, each hallway, each corner stored, not just visually but emotionally, sensorially, completely. The living room drew you back like gravity. Your dad was still reading, or reading again, or had moved on to something else, maybe the crossword. That Sunday ritual of pen and paper and slow problem solving that felt more like meditation than work. Your mum was folding laundry maybe, or had moved to the kitchen to prep something for lunch, or was settled in her own chair with her own book, her own slice of Sunday peace. The television was still on, though the programming had evolved again, moved through cartoons to something else, maybe a cooking show, maybe a home improvement show, maybe sports starting early. The content didn't matter. The TV was more like a campfire at this point, something to gather around, something that created light and sound and a focal point for the room without demanding full attention. You settled back onto the couch, but in a different configuration this time, maybe upside down, legs draped over the back, head dangling toward the floor, because why not? Because Sunday morning allowed for unconventional positions, because your body wanted to experience the world from different angles, because being upside down made the room look interesting and new. Here's something curious about children and physical play. Researchers studying motor development have found that children who are allowed to move freely to experiment with their bodies in various positions and orientations develop better spatial awareness, stronger core stability, and more confident physical self. You weren't exercising, you were learning, through play, through exploration, through the simple act of being upside down on the couch, because it felt good, comfortable. Your dad asked, looking over his newspaper, eyebrow raised but mouth smiling. Very, you said. Or maybe you just grinned, your response clear, even without words. He went back to his reading, and you stayed upside down until the blood rushing to your head made you dizzy in that pleasant, almost giggly way. Then you righted yourself, flopped sideways, arranged yourself in yet another configuration. The couch was yours to rearrange yourself upon. This was understood, accepted, allowed. Some parents would have said sit properly or stop fidgeting, but yours understood, or at least tolerated, that children's bodies need to move, need to experiment, need to find comfort through constant adjustment, rather than static positioning. Some developmental psychologists argue that overly restrictive rules about how children should sit, how they should move, how they should occupy space, can dampen their natural kinesthetic intelligence and body confidence. Your parents, whether consciously or instinctively, were giving you space to be physical, to be flexible, to be young. Outside, the sound of the lawnmower had stopped. The neighborhood had settled into its own Sunday rhythm, periods of activity punctuated by periods of rest. You could hear kids playing now, closer than before, maybe in your own yard, maybe next door. Voices calling out, laughter, the universal sounds of children at play. The pull to join them was there, but not urgent yet. You were still in that in-between space, still savoring indoor comfort, still not quite ready to transition to the different energy of outdoor play. This hesitation, this savoring of transition, was another luxury of Sunday. You didn't have to rush into the next thing. You could linger in the space between. Your mum appeared from wherever she'd been, smiled at your sideways position on the couch. Having fun, ham, you confirmed, because you were, even though you weren't doing anything that would traditionally be categorized as fun. Just existing was fun. Just being comfortable in your body, in your house, on your Sunday morning was fun. Let me know if you want to do something later, she said. Maybe we could go to the park, or the library, or just stay here. Whatever sounds good. The offer hung in the air, pleasant and pressure-free, options without obligation, possibilities without plans. This was parenting at its best, creating structure enough to feel safe, freedom enough to feel autonomous. Some attachment theorists study what they call authoritative parenting, the style that balances warmth with boundaries, that offers guidance without control, that creates security through consistent presence rather than rigid rules. You were experiencing it without knowing it, learning that adults could be trustworthy guides who enhanced rather than restricted your freedom. Okay, you said, non-committal, keeping your options open, appreciating the offer without needing to accept it immediately. She moved on, back to whatever Sunday project she'd been engaged in, leaving you to your sideways couch lounging, your upside-down blood rush experiments, your Sunday morning explorations of comfort and position. The clock, if you'd looked, which you still probably didn't, might have shown mid-morning now, maybe 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. Time was accumulating without feeling spent. Hours were passing without feeling past. This is what abundance feels like. time that doesn't run out, moments that don't need accounting for, hours that belong to you absolutely and completely. You rolled off the couch, onto the floor, just because you could. The carpet was soft under your back, slightly rough against your arms, familiar and comfortable. You looked up at the ceiling, at the texture there, at the light fixture, at the corner where wall met ceiling, and maybe there was a spiderweb, or maybe there was ceiling gazing. What a luxury. What a perfectly Sunday morning activity. And you breathe, loose and free as time itself. The morning was maturing now, moving from that soft, sleepy early phase into something more wakeful, more energized, while still maintaining its essential Sundayness. The light through the windows was brighter, more assertive, losing some of its golden quality and taking on the clarity of midday approaching. You could feel the shift without seeing a clock. Your body knew, the house knew. The rhythm of the day was building toward something, toward the afternoon that would follow, but it wasn't there yet. You were still in morning, still in that liminal Sunday space where anything might happen or nothing might happen, and both options were equally good. From the floor, you surveyed the room from yet another angle. How different everything looked from down here, the furniture looming larger, the ceiling seeming farther away, the whole space transformed by perspective. Children spend so much time on floors. You were learning without knowing you were learning. Floors are playgrounds, construction sites, rest stops, vantage points. Something shifted inside you, subtle at first, like a growing awareness that the inside space had been fully explored, fully inhabited. You'd done the morning. You'd lived in its quiet rhythms, moved through its familiar rooms, felt the weight of breakfast and cartoons and floor time settle into your bones. Now there was something else calling, something beyond the walls. The pull toward outside wasn't urgent or demanding. It was more like a gentle tug, a quiet recognition that the day was waiting for you out there, that the morning had more to offer than just these indoor spaces. You could feel it in your body, a restlessness that wasn't quite boredom, an energy that wanted to expand beyond the living room, the kitchen, the cool air-conditioned cocoon of the house. You stood up, moved toward the back door almost without deciding to. Your bare feet carried you across the carpet, then the cool linoleum of the kitchen, following an instinct older than thought. The screen door. God, that screen door. Every house had one, didn't it? That thin metal frame with its mesh screen, slightly warped from years of opening and closing, painted white or aluminum silver, with that little hook-and-eye latch that never quite latched properly. You pushed the handle down, that distinctive mechanical click, and pulled the door open. Asterisk creaky, asterisk, that sound, that perfect, metallic, spring-loaded creak, the hinges protesting slightly, the whole frame flexing as the door swung outward. It was the sound of transition, of threshold crossing, of leaving one world and entering another. You'd heard it 1,000 times, would hear it 1,000 more, and each time it would mark the same transformation, inside to outside, contained to open, cool to warm. The sound alone could trigger memories. Years later, you'd hear a screen door creak in a completely different place, a different house, a different season, and you'd be instantly transported back to Sunday mornings, to that specific feeling of stepping out into summer air, into possibility. But that was later. Right now, you were just pushing through, feeling the door's resistance and then its release, stepping across the threshold. The temperature change hit you immediately. Inside, air conditioning, that steady, cool hum of climate control. The air slightly stale and recycled, but comfortable, predictable. Outside, heat, not oppressive heat, not yet. This was still morning after all, but present heat, alive heat. The air was thick with it, dense and tangible. It wrapped around you like a physical thing, like stepping into water, and your body registered the shift instantly. Skin adjusting, pores responding, the whole complex system of your temperature regulation kicking into a different mode. The humidity hung in the air like a presence. You could almost see it, that slight haze over everything, that quality of light that was both bright and soft at the same time. The sun was climbing higher now, probably approaching late morning, and its warmth was everywhere, in the air itself, in the light that touched your face and arms, in the concrete of the back porch beneath your feet. You stood there for a moment in the doorway, half in and half out, the screen door slowly closing behind you with another smaller creak, and then the soft asterisk, thwop asterisk of it settling into its frame. That sound too was iconic, part of the complete experience, the opening creak and the closing thwop, marking the boundaries of your passage. Then you stepped forward onto the grass. The sensation of grass under bare feet, another childhood essential, another piece of the Sunday morning puzzle. The blades were still slightly damp from last night's watering, or maybe just from morning dew, cool and soft and ticklish against your soles. Each step was an experience, the give of the earth beneath, the texture of individual grass blades, the occasional stick or pebble that made you step carefully. You walked out into the yard, feeling the grass give way to bare patches here and there, the terrain of your small kingdom, because that's what the backyard was, wasn't it? Your kingdom, your territory, your space to roam and explore and inhabit however you wanted. The yard wasn't large, most suburban backyards weren't, but to you it felt vast, endless. Even there was the patio area near the house, concrete squares with grass growing between them. There was the main lawn, mowed into neat rows that were already starting to blur as the grass grew between cuts. There was the fence line, wooden slats or chain link, depending on your particular house, marking the boundaries of your domain and the beginning of the neighbor's realms. There were trees, maybe a big oak or maple casting shade in one corner, its leaves rustling in whatever breeze decided to visit. Or maybe a couple of smaller trees, fruit trees perhaps, their branches within climbing reach, their shade spotty and shifting throughout the day. There might have been a shed in one corner, metal or wooden, where the lawnmower lived, and tools hung on nails and old paint cans accumulated dust. The shed door was probably slightly ajar, or maybe firmly closed with a padlock. But either way, it stood as another landmark in your geography, another point of reference in your mental map. The fence itself was its own feature. You could walk along it, running your hand along the wood or metal, feeling the texture change from smooth to rough to splintered to rusty. You could peer through the gaps, or chain-link diamonds into the neighbors' yards, catching glimpses of their different grass, their different toys, their different versions of the same Sunday morning. But the main feature, the central truth of the backyard, was the space itself, the openness, the freedom. Because out here, you could run, you could spin in circles until you got dizzy. You could lie down flat on your back in the grass and stare up at the sky, feeling the earth solid beneath you and the atmosphere infinite above you. You could dig in the dirt if you wanted, or climb the fence, or just stand still and listen to the sounds of the neighborhood. Distant lawnmowers, far-off dogs, birds calling to each other, the ambient hum of Sunday morning spreading out around you in all directions. The transition from inside to outside wasn't just physical, it was psychological, emotional, existential even. Inside was containment, structure, the known world of rooms and walls and television schedules. Outside was possibility, expansion, the bigger world that stretched beyond your immediate experience. Inside, you were a kid in a house. Outside, you were a person in the universe. The liberation of it was quiet but profound. You could feel it in the way your body loosened, the way your breathing deepened, the way your awareness expanded to take in the whole surrounding space. The morning was no longer something happening to you in discrete episodes, breakfast, then cartoons, then floor time. Now it was something you were inside of, something you could move through and interact with and shape according to your own desires. You might decide to do something specific, ride your bike, if you had one, play with a ball, start a game of some kind, with whatever toys or equipment were available. Or you might do nothing specific at all. Just wander and explore and exist in the space, letting the morning unfold around you without agenda or plan. The thing about Sunday morning outside was that time behaved differently here too, just like it did inside, but the quality was altered. Inside, time was slow and soft and wrapped in familiar comfort. Outside, time was slow and vast and full of potential. The sun would move across the sky. You could even track it if you paid attention, watching shadows shift and shorten, but the movement felt like part of the natural order rather than a countdown toward something ending. Nothing had to end yet, not for hours. The afternoon was still far off, evening even farther. You were standing in the deepest part of Sunday morning's pool, where the water was warmest and calmest, where you could float forever without touching bottom or worrying about the edge. You took a few more steps into the yard, feeling the grass beneath your feet, the sun on your face, the air thick and warm around you. The screen door behind you had long since closed, its creak and thwop already fading into the background of your awareness. You were outside now, fully outside, and the morning stretched out around you like an invitation, like a question without words. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? How do you want to fill this space and this time that belongs entirely to you? The answer, of course, was anything, everything, nothing. All of it was available. All of it was Sunday morning. There was a particular quality to playing alone that you wouldn't fully appreciate until much later, when alone time became rare and precious and scheduled. But on Sunday morning, alone was just the default state. Not lonely, never lonely, just singular, complete unto yourself. You were the only kid in your yard. Your siblings, if you had them, were somewhere else, still inside, or in their own corners of the house, or maybe not awake yet. The neighboring kids hadn't emerged yet either, or if they had, they were in their own yards, separated by fences. And the unspoken understanding that Sunday morning was a time for parallel play, not coordinated games. So you were alone with your imagination, alone with the yard, alone with whatever caught your interest. Maybe you had a toy with you, something you'd grabbed on the way out, or something that lived permanently in the garage or on the back porch. A ball, perhaps. Not for any organized sport, nothing so structured as that, but just to throw against the side of the house, or to bounce in that rhythmic, meditative way that required no thought but filled time perfectly. Throw, catch, the rubber ball smacking against the brick or siding, the satisfying pop of it landing back in your palm, over and over until the repetition became almost trance-like. Or maybe you'd found a stick. God, the power of a good stick. It wasn't just wood, it was a sword, a wand, a staff, a fishing pole, a tool for drawing in the dirt, a conductor's baton for the symphony of morning sounds. You could spend 20 minutes just looking for the right stick, testing different candidates for weight and balance and straightness, rejecting those that were too brittle or too heavy or wrong in some indefinable way that only you could sense. Once you found the right one, the possibilities were endless. You could battle invisible enemies, each swing cutting through the humid air with a satisfying whoosh. You could poke at things, anthills, interesting rocks, suspicious patches of dirt. You could use it to knock against the fence in a rhythmic pattern, creating your own percussion, your own soundtrack to the morning. Or maybe toys weren't part of it at all. Maybe you were just being, moving through space, exploring the familiar terrain of your own backyard as if it were brand new, because in some way, it always was. The morning light hit things differently than afternoon light. The grass was damper now than it would be later. The shadows fell at angles you'd seen 1,000 times, but somehow never got old. You might crouch down to examine something tiny, an ant carrying a crumb 3 times its size, an impressive feat of engineering and determination playing out at ground level. You could watch 4 minutes, fascinated by the ant's single-minded purpose, the way it navigated around obstacles, adjusted its grip, kept moving forward no matter what. Or maybe you spotted a spiderweb strung between fence posts or hanging in the corner of the porch, droplets of dew catching the light like diamonds. You'd move closer carefully, not wanting to destroy it, marveling at the geometric precision, the delicate strength of something so fine it was nearly invisible except when the light hit it just right. The remarkable thing about solitary play was how unlonely it felt. You weren't missing anything. You weren't wishing for company. You were complete in yourself, your imagination sufficient entertainment, your own curiosity enough to sustain hours of engagement. This was before the age of constant connectivity, before the idea that alone meant disconnected. This was a different kind of alone, a full alone, a rich alone. You were alone with the world, not separated from it. You could hear things more clearly when you were by yourself. The neighbor's wind chimes, tinkling softly when a breeze passed through. A car starting somewhere on the street out front. The engine sound muffled by distance and the barrier of your house. Birds calling to each other, not generic bird sounds, but specific conversations. Distinct voices that you might not be able to identify by species, but that you recognized as part of the morning's soundtrack. Somewhere, someone was mowing their lawn. Not your lawn. Your parents wouldn't start that until later, but someone else's. The sound distant and sporadic, as they worked their way through their yard in strips. The smell of cut grass would drift over eventually. That green, fresh scent that meant weekend mornings. That meant summer. That meant everything was exactly as it should be. You might have started building something, not with blocks or construction toys. Those were inside toys, but with what was available out here. A pile of sticks arranged into a structure that made sense to you, even if it would look like random debris to anyone else. Or a hole dug with a stick, or a small hand shovel, if you had one, deepening inch by inch, for no purpose other than to see how deep you could go, how far down into the earth your small excavation could reach. Or maybe you'd found the hose, turned it on to just a trickle, and were creating rivers in the dirt, watching water find its path, carving tiny canyons and forming miniature lakes and depressions. You were a god in this moment, shaping the landscape, controlling the flow of water, creating and destroying geography with just a slight adjustment of the nozzle or a strategic placement of a rock. The thing about this kind of play was that it didn't announce itself. There was no "I'm going to go play now" moment. You just moved from one thing to another, attention flowing naturally from ant to stick to water to fence to grass to sky, each thing holding your focus for exactly as long as it needed to before releasing you to the next discovery. Time wasn't marked by accomplishments or levels completed or games won. Time was marked by the gradual warming of the air, by the slow drying of the grass beneath your feet, by the shifting quality of light as the sun climbed higher. You might look up at some point and realize that what had felt like 10 minutes of playing had actually been an hour, or that what you'd thought was surely an hour of digging and building had only been 15 minutes. But you never checked a clock. Why would you? Time was irrelevant to this kind of play. There were no deadlines, no schedules to keep, no places to be. Sunday morning held you in its palm, and you were free to use that time however you wanted. Your parents were inside, probably. Maybe your mom was reading the paper, or starting to think about lunch, even though breakfast wasn't that long ago. Maybe your dad was tinkering with something in the garage, or still planted on the couch with his coffee and the crossword puzzle. They knew you were outside, they'd heard the screen door, or seen you through the window, but they weren't watching, weren't supervising, weren't worried. This was a different era of parenting, or maybe just a different recognition of what Sunday morning meant. You were in your own yard, you were safe, you were occupied. That was enough. The freedom of that unsupervised play, the trust inherent in it, was profound even if you didn't consciously recognize it at the time. You could take risks, small ones, appropriate ones, like climbing higher in the tree than you'd managed before, or jumping off the porch step from a standing position instead of sitting. You could test your own limits, develop your own sense of what was possible and what was too dangerous, all without adult commentary or intervention. You might get dirty, probably would get dirty, actually. Grass stains on your knees, dirt under your fingernails, maybe a smudge of mud on your shirt or face, but this was expected, acceptable, even desirable in some way. Getting dirty was proof you'd been doing something, engaging with the physical world, using your body and your imagination in concert. The quality of attention you brought to your solitary play was different from the attention you give to group play later, or to structured activities, or to television. This was deep attention, absorbed attention, the kind where you lost yourself completely in whatever you were doing. No performance anxiety, no need to explain or justify your play to others, no negotiating about whose idea to follow. Just you and your imagination and the raw materials of the world around you. You might have created elaborate scenarios in your mind. Maybe that stick wasn't just a stick, it was Excalibur, and you were Arthur, and the backyard was Camelot, and you were defending the kingdom against invaders only you could see. Or maybe the pile of leaves in the corner wasn't just yard waste, it was a dragon's lair, and you were the knight who'd been sent to negotiate or fight or befriend, depending on what the narrative needed. These fantasies were vivid, but also fluid. The story could change mid-play, could fork in new directions, could be abandoned entirely for something else, if inspiration struck. There was no one to tell you that didn't make sense, or that you should stick to one game, or that you were doing it wrong. There was no wrong. There was just play, pure and uncomplicated. And underneath it all, supporting it all, was the Sunday morningness of it. The specific quality of this time, this day, this freedom. The knowledge that nothing would intrude on this play. That no one would call you in to get ready for school, or to do chores, or to rush to some appointment. The afternoon would come eventually, bringing its own rhythms and possibilities. But right now, in the late morning warmth of Sunday, you were suspended in timelessness, in complete presence, in the perfect self-sufficiency of solitary play. You were whole. You were enough. You were exactly where you needed to be, doing exactly what you needed to do, which was nothing and everything all at once. If you stopped moving for a moment, really stopped, held still, let the immediate sounds of your own breathing and footsteps fade, you could hear the whole neighborhood living around you. Sunday morning had its own acoustic signature, as distinct and recognizable as a song you'd heard 1,000 times. The sounds weren't loud, weren't intrusive, but they formed a kind of ambient tapestry, a background texture that told you exactly what day it was and what kind of day it would be. The lawnmowers were the most prominent instruments in this symphony, not just one, but several, scattered across different yards at different distances. Each one had its own voice, the deeper rumble of a riding mower from a few houses down, the higher-pitched whine of a push mower closer by, the start-stop pattern of someone who kept pausing to empty the bag or navigate around obstacles. The sounds would overlap and separate, fade and swell as mowers moved closer to or farther from your position. Sometimes you could track someone's progress just by listening. They'd start in the front yard, the sound muffled by the house, then gradually work their way to the back, the motor growing louder as they approached the shared fence line, then fading again as they moved to the far side of their property. These weren't weekday lawnmower sounds, urgent, early morning interruptions before people left for work. These were Sunday sounds, leisurely and unrushed. People took their time. They might stop mid-mow to chat with a neighbor over the fence, or to go inside for water, or just to stand in the shade for a minute before continuing. The mowing would happen, but it would happen on Sunday time, which was a different tempo altogether. Between the mechanical sounds were the wind chimes. It seemed like every third house had them, metal tubes or wooden pieces suspended from porches or tree branches, waiting for the slightest breeze to activate them. When the air was completely still, they were silent, dormant, but when even the faintest breath of wind moved through, they came alive. Each set had its own pitch, its own pattern. The Johnsons 2 doors down had deep, resonant tubes that produced low, melodic tones. The family across the back fence had smaller, higher-pitched chimes that tinkled in a lighter, more delicate way. Somewhere farther off, maybe on the next street over, someone had bamboo chimes that made a softer, woodier sound, less metallic, more organic. The chimes never played together in any coordinated way. That wasn't the point. They responded to different microclimates of breeze, different timing, different wind patterns flowing through the neighborhood's complex geography of houses and trees and fences. But together, they created an unpredictable melody, a chance composition that was never the same twice. Dogs were part of the soundscape too. Not aggressive barking, not the territorial alarm calls that would erupt when someone walked by on the sidewalk during the week. These were Sunday barks, conversational, sporadic, almost lazy. A dog in one yard would bark a few times, maybe at a squirrel or just for the pleasure of making noise. A dog 3 houses away would answer, not urgently but companionably. Then silence for a while before another dog, in a different direction entirely, would add their voice to the mix. You could map the neighborhood by its dogs if you wanted to. The deep, authoritative woof of the German Shepherd on the corner, the high, yappy excitement of the terrier mix behind you, the baying howl of what might have been a beagle several houses away, that particular sound that seemed designed to carry maximum distance with minimum effort. Children's voices drifted over fences and through yards, but distant, muffled, not quite distinct enough to make out words. Just the rising and falling tones of play, of argument, of excitement. Someone's brother or sister was yelling about something. Someone else was laughing. That particular shriek laugh that kids produce when something strikes them as absolutely hilarious. A parent's voice would cut through occasionally, calling someone's name, telling someone to be careful or come here, or stop doing whatever they were doing. These voices created a sense of parallel existence. Other families, other kids, other Sunday mornings happening all around you, separate but connected by the shared experience of this day, this time, this particular quality of freedom and leisure. Car doors slammed with that heavy, solid thunk that cars used to make before everything became lighter and more hollow. Someone was going somewhere, or had just come back from somewhere. Church. Maybe there was always a wave of departures, mid-morning as people headed to services. Then another wave of returns near lunchtime. Families dressed in their Sunday best climbing out of sedans and minivans, their voices carrying across yards as they made their way inside. The occasional car would drive past on your street, the sound approaching from one direction, peaking as it passed your house, then receding in the other direction. But these weren't the constant flow of weekday traffic. Sunday morning traffic was sparse, occasional, almost contemplative. People drove slower. They weren't rushing to work or racing to appointments. They were just going somewhere, at Sunday speed. Somewhere, a basketball was bouncing. That distinctive rhythm, bounce, bounce, bounce. Then the scrape and swish or clank as someone took a shot. Then either silence, if it went in, or the chaotic pattern of a miss and a chase. Then the rhythm would start again. Bounce, bounce, bounce. It might go on for 5 minutes or 50. That meditative repetition. Someone practicing free throws, or just enjoying the simple pleasure of dribbling, making that rubber-on-concrete percussion that somehow fit perfectly into the Sunday morning mix. Birds contributed their own layer to the soundscape, though you'd have to listen specifically to pick them out from the human and mechanical sounds. Cardinals with their sharp, clear whistles, mourning doves with their low, melancholy cooing, crows calling raucously to each other, probably arguing over territory or food, robins chirping in rapid, complex patterns, mockingbirds doing their thing, cycling through their repertoire of stolen songs, showing off their vocal range. The birds didn't know it was Sunday, of course. To them, it was just another day. But somehow their presence, their constant background activity, their obliviousness to human schedules and human categories of time, made the Sundayness even more pronounced. They were the constant against which the human variation played out. A screen door would creak open somewhere, not yours, but similar. That same metallic groan of springs and hinges, then footsteps on a wooden deck or concrete patio, then voices, adults talking at normal volume, maybe discussing the plans for the day, or commenting on the weather, or mentioning something that needed to be done around the house. Their words wouldn't carry clearly enough to understand, but the tone did, relaxed, unhurried, the verbal equivalent of a Sunday morning stretch. Wind moved through the trees in waves, creating a susurration that rose and fell like breathing. When it picked up, you could hear it coming, leaves rustling in the distance, then closer, then right overhead, then moving away again, traveling across the neighborhood like an invisible presence. In the silence after the wind passed, everything seemed quieter, more still, as if the neighborhood was catching its breath. Occasionally, there'd be the metallic clink of a flag chain against a flagpole, someone in the neighborhood being patriotic or just liking the aesthetic of a flag in their yard. The sound was rhythmic when the wind was steady, irregular when the breeze was fitful, but always present once you noticed it. That small percussion adding to the overall composition. Someone was using a hammer, driving nails in short bursts. Bang, 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 pause, bang, bang, longer pause, bang. They were building something or fixing something, working on some project that Sunday morning had made time for. The sound was purposeful but not urgent, part of that Sunday tradition of tackling small tasks at your own pace, stopping when you felt like it, continuing when inspiration returned. Water sounds wove through everything. A sprinkler system starting up somewhere, the hiss and spray of water under pressure, a hose running in someone's yard, the splash as water hit concrete or grass or the side of a car being washed. These sounds were particularly summery, particularly Sunday, the sound of people tending to their properties, keeping things green and clean, but doing so leisurely, without the rushed efficiency of weekday maintenance. The ice cream truck music was still hours away. That wouldn't come until afternoon, if it came at all, but its absence was notable, a sound you expected later but not yet, marking the boundaries of morning versus afternoon in your mental map of the day. What was remarkable about all these sounds together was how they never quite overwhelmed each other. They formed layers, depths, a three-dimensional audio landscape where you could focus on any one element or let them all blur together into a general sense of neighborhood Sundayness. Nothing was too loud. Nothing demanded immediate attention. Everything existed in this peaceful coexistence, this sonic democracy where and wind chimes and dogs and children and birds all had equal voice. And underneath it all, beneath all the specific, identifiable sounds, there was the hum, not mechanical, exactly, but not quite natural either. The ambient sound of electricity flowing through wires, of air conditioners doing their work, of the modern suburban infrastructure maintaining itself. You couldn't point to it directly, couldn't say that's the source of the hum, but it was there, a subsonic presence that you'd only notice when everything else went quiet. The neighborhood sounds told you things without words. They told you that other people were awake and going about their mornings. They told you that the world was functioning normally, that Sunday was proceeding according to its unofficial but universally understood schedule. They told you that you were part of something larger than just your own yard, your own experience, but that the larger thing wasn't demanding or intrusive. It was just there, present, companionable. You could stand in your backyard and close your eyes and know exactly what day it was, what time of day it was, what season it was, all just from the sounds. The acoustic signature was that specific, that unmistakable. And in the pauses between sounds, and there were pauses, moments when everything seemed to hold still at once, when the mowers stopped and the dogs quieted and even the wind died down. In those pauses you could hear the silence itself, not absence of sound, but a presence of its own, a thick, full quiet that was as much a part of Sunday morning as any of the noises that punctuated it. The neighborhood was alive around you, living its own version of Sunday morning, and you were part of it, connected to it through this invisible web of sound, this shared soundtrack that everyone contributed to and everyone enjoyed, mostly without even consciously noticing it. But when you did notice, when you stopped and really listened, it was like being let in on a secret. The secret that Sunday morning wasn't just a personal experience, it was a collective creation, a neighborhood-wide agreement to slow down, to breathe, to exist at a different pace. And you could hear that agreement in every sound, in the leisurely rhythm of mowers, and the random melody of chimes, and the conversational barking of dogs, and all the other sounds layered together into something that meant Sunday morning, home. You were in the middle of something, not something important, necessarily, but something that had your complete attention. Maybe you were examining a particularly interesting bug, or building something with sticks and rocks, or just lying on your back in the grass, watching clouds reshape themselves across the sky. And then you heard it. Your name, called from inside the house, not shouted, exactly, not urgent or alarmed, just called, projected through an open window or screen door, carrying across the yard with that particular parental tone that meant, I need you to acknowledge that you heard me. The first call you might have genuinely not heard, or only half heard, a sound that registered somewhere in your consciousness but didn't quite break through the absorption of whatever you were doing. Your brain was still categorizing it, deciding whether it required a response or could be safely ignored. But then it came again, your name, louder this time, with a slight edge of I know you can hear me. This time you couldn't pretend, you had to respond. What you yelled back, not moving from your position, hoping that whatever they wanted could be handled at a distance. Through this shouted conversation across the threshold between inside and outside, the response came, but you couldn't quite make it out. The words blurred together, muffled by distance and walls and the ambient noise of the neighborhood. You caught maybe one word in three, enough to know they were saying something but not enough to know what. This was the moment of decision. You could yell, "What?" again, initiating another round of incomprehensible long-distance communication. Or you could get up and go closer, meet them halfway, find out what they wanted with less effort than this shouting match required. The thing about the call from inside was that it represented a potential interruption to your perfect Sunday morning flow. You'd been outside existing in your own time, your own rhythm, completely absorbed in the present moment. And now the inside world was reaching out, pulling at your attention, reminding you that you weren't completely autonomous, that you were still connected to the household and its needs and schedules. But the call also wasn't threatening. This wasn't come in right now or you're in trouble. This was just a summons, a request for your presence or attention. And the tone, even at a distance, told you everything you needed to know about the urgency low and the likely consequence of ignoring it. Eventually, you'd have to deal with it anyway, so might as well find out what they want. You pushed yourself up from whatever position you were in, sitting, lying, crouching, and brushed off the grass and dirt that had accumulated on your clothes and skin. Your hands left green smears on your shorts or jeans. Your knees bore the imprint of whatever surface you'd been kneeling on, evidence of your outdoor time, worn proudly. You walked toward the house, not hurrying but not dawdling either, just moving at a Sunday morning pace, which was the only pace that felt right for this moment. As you got closer to the back door, you could see through the screen a figure moving in the kitchen, probably Mum, though it could have been Dad, depending on your particular household dynamics. They were doing something, putting dishes away, maybe, or wiping down the counter, or just standing there with that particular parental stance that meant they were thinking about what needed to happen next. "Here," you said as you reached the door, not quite opening it yet, standing on the threshold, literally and figuratively. One foot in the outside world and one foot ready to step back into the inside one. "Come here for a second," they said, turning to look at you through the screen. You pulled the door open, that familiar creak, the one you'd heard from outside earlier when you'd gone out, and stepped inside. The temperature change was immediate and striking. Outside had been getting progressively warmer as the morning advanced, the humidity building, the sun climbing higher. Inside was still cool, still air-conditioned, and the contrast made goosebumps rise on your arms. The light was different to dimmer, more filtered, less immediate than the bright outdoor sun. "What?" you asked again, this time from inside, this time able to have an actual conversation instead of shouting. And then came the request. It could have been anything. "I need you to run upstairs and get my sunglasses from my bedroom. Can you help me carry these groceries in from the car?" Do you want something to drink? You've been outside for a while. Your friend called. They wanted to know if you can come over later. We're going to leave for lunch in about an hour, so don't get too involved in anything outside. The specific content of the request almost didn't matter. What mattered was the interruption itself, the pulling back from that outside absorption into inside concerns, inside time, inside logistics. Sometimes the request was simple and could be handled immediately. You'd run upstairs to get the sunglasses, or accept the offered glass of water, or acknowledge the information about lunch plans. These transactions took less than a minute, and then you were free to go back outside, to return to your solitary play, or exploration, or contemplation. Other times, the call from inside revealed something more significant, a shift in the day's plans, a new expectation, a gradual encroachment of structure onto the unstructured morning. We need to get ready to go soon, or I need you to clean up your room before lunch, or your grandma's coming over in a bit, so maybe stay where I can see you. These announcements didn't end the Sunday morning. Exactly, but they put boundaries around it, reminded you that even Sunday mornings eventually transitioned into Sunday afternoons, which had their own rhythms and requirements. The interesting thing was how you responded to these calls emotionally. Sometimes there was mild irritation. Couldn't they see you were busy? But it was never deep or lasting. Sometimes there was curiosity. What could they possibly need? Sometimes there was even relief, a break in the solitude that you hadn't realized you were ready for. But most often, there was just acceptance. This was part of the pattern. You were a kid, they were the parents, and occasionally they needed you for something, needed to communicate something, needed to pull you back into the family orbit for a moment. It wasn't oppressive or controlling, it was just how things worked. Standing there in the kitchen, cool air raising goosebumps on your sun-warmed skin, dirt under your fingernails and grass stains on your knees, you were briefly caught between worlds. Outside you were autonomous, self-directed, complete. Inside you were a member of a household, part of a family system, subject to the needs and schedules of the group. Neither state was better or worse than the other. They were just different, and the call from inside was the mechanism that moved you between them. Okay, you'd say, in response to whatever they'd asked or told you, and you'd complete whatever small task they needed, or you'd absorb whatever information they were conveying, and then you'd hover near the door waiting to see if there was anything else ready to return to your outside world as soon as you were released. That's all. Thanks, honey, they might say, already turning back to their own tasks, their own Sunday morning activities. Or sometimes they'd linger a moment, look at you with that parental assessment that took in your dishevelment, your obvious contentment, your evidence of outdoor play, having fun out there. Yeah, you'd answer, because fun wasn't even quite the right word for what you were having, but it was the closest available term. Don't get too hot. Come in if you need to, cool off. Okay, and we'll probably eat lunch around noon, so keep that in mind. Okay. These exchanges were brief but important. They were check-ins, connection points, small moments of contact that reminded both of you that even in the freedom and autonomy of Sunday morning, you were still connected, still part of something larger than your individual experience. Then you'd turn back toward the door, push it open again, hear that creak that was already so familiar you barely noticed it, and step back outside. The heat would hit you again, the humidity, the bright light. Your eyes would need a moment to adjust after the dimness of the kitchen. The neighborhood sounds would reassemble themselves in your consciousness. You'd been so focused on the inside conversation that they'd faded to background. But now they came back into focus. Lawnmowers, wind chimes, a dog barking somewhere. And you'd walk back into your yard, back to whatever you'd been doing, or back to nothing in particular. And the Sunday morning would continue, barely interrupted its flow, only momentarily disturbed by that brief return to the inside world. The thing about the call from inside was that it wasn't really an intrusion. It was more like punctuation, a comma in the ongoing sentence of your morning, not a period. A brief pause that actually somehow enhanced what came before and after it, by providing contrast, by reminding you of what you had out here, this freedom, this space, this time that was yours. You'd settle back into your play, or your wandering, or your lying in the grass, and within minutes it would be as if the interruption had never happened. You'd be fully absorbed again, fully present, fully in Sunday morning mode. But somewhere in the back of your mind, you'd registered it. You'd been reminded that lunch was coming, that the afternoon would eventually arrive, that this morning wasn't infinite, even if it felt that way. The call from inside was a gentle nudge, toward time, toward progression, toward the inevitable movement of the day forward. Not urgent, not demanding, just a reminder. The world is still here. Your family is still here. The day is still happening, even in this slow, suspended Sunday morning way. And somehow, that reminder made the present moment even sweeter, because you knew, at some level, that this wouldn't last forever, that eventually you'd be called in for lunch, or the afternoon would arrive, or Monday would come. The call from inside was a tiny preview of that eventual return, which made the time you had right now, in this moment, in this yard, in this sunshine, feel even more precious. So you'd play harder, look closer, feel more deeply, not frantically, not desperately, but with a fuller presence, a richer awareness, because you'd been reminded, however gently, that Sunday morning was temporary, and that made it perfect. You could feel it now, even if you couldn't name it, a subtle shift in the quality of the morning, a gradual crescendo that suggested something was approaching its conclusion, not ending abruptly, not being torn away, but naturally completing itself, like a song moving toward its final verse. The sun was high now, not quite directly overhead, but climbing toward that apex where shadows would shrink to almost nothing beneath things. The heat had built steadily throughout the morning, accumulating in the air, in the ground, in your skin. What had been warm and pleasant earlier now had weight to it, presence, a thickness that made movement feel slightly more effortful. You weren't tired, exactly, but you could feel the morning's activities settling into your body, all that playing and wandering and exploring, leaving a pleasant residue of physical expenditure. Your legs had that loose, well-used feeling. Your arms bore the evidence of outdoor life, dirt, grass stains, maybe a scratch from a thorny bush you'd gotten too close to, a mosquito bite you'd only just noticed. The yard looked different now than it had when you'd first come outside. The grass had dried completely, losing that morning dampness, becoming crunchy and warm underfoot. The shadows had shifted dramatically, redrawing the map of light and shade across your territory. What had been in shadow was now in sun. What had been bright was now shaded. The whole geography had transformed through the simple passage of time and the sun's movement across the sky. You could hear it in the neighborhood sounds too, that subtle change in tempo and texture. The lawnmowers had mostly finished their work. The steady background drone of motors either completed or taking a lunch break. Fewer car doors were slamming. The basketball that had been bouncing rhythmically somewhere nearby had gone silent. Even the dogs seemed quieter, probably sprawled in whatever cool spots they could find, panting in the increasing heat. There was a sense of pause settling over everything, a collective breath between the morning's activities and whatever the afternoon would bring. Sunday was transitioning, moving from one phase to another, and you could feel that transition happening all around you. Inside the house, you could sense preparations beginning. Maybe you'd heard the refrigerator open and close a few times, suggesting lunch was being contemplated or assembled. Maybe you'd caught a glimpse through the window of someone setting the table. Maybe it was just a sixth sense developed through repetition. You knew, from countless previous Sundays, that the call would come soon. The real call, the time to come in call, not the brief interruption from earlier. But you weren't inside yet. You still had these moments, these final minutes of outdoor Sunday morning freedom, and somehow, knowing they were finite, made them more vivid, more saturated with meaning. You might have done one last thing, climbed the tree one more time, just to sit in its branches and look out over the yard from that elevated perspective, or taken one final lap around the perimeter, touching each fence post or familiar landmark as if saying goodbye, or simply stood in the middle of the lawn, turning slowly in a circle, taking in the whole space, trying to memorize the feeling even though you'd be back out here tomorrow, or later today, or the next Sunday. There was something bittersweet about these final moments. Not sad, exactly. The morning had been perfect, had given you everything it had to give, but there was an awareness now, a consciousness of ending that hadn't been present earlier when time felt infinite and the morning stretched out like an endless ocean. You were hungry again, properly hungry, not just the mild interest in snacking that you might have felt earlier. Your stomach was reminding you that breakfast was hours ago, that you'd been active and outdoors and using energy, that your body needed fuel. The hunger wasn't unpleasant, just present, another signal that time had passed, that the day was moving forward. The quality of light was changing too, becoming harsher, more direct. The soft, forgiving light of early morning was gone. This was midday light, bright and strong and unambiguous. It washed out colors slightly, made everything look more stark, created deeper contrasts between light and shadow. Beautiful in its own way, but different, definitely different. You might have noticed sweat beading on your forehead, dampening your hairline, making your shirt stick slightly to your back. The heat was real now, not something you could ignore or barely notice. It pressed down from above, radiated up from the ground below, surrounded you completely. Another marker of time passing, of the morning giving way to afternoon. And yet, even knowing all this, even feeling the shift happening, you lingered, because these were still Sunday morning minutes. Technically, the official transition hadn't happened yet. You hadn't been called in. You hadn't sat down to lunch. You were still in the liminal space, still able to claim these moments as part of the morning rather than the afternoon. So you used them, squeezed every last drop of experience from them. Maybe you lay down in the grass one more time, flat on your back, arms spread wide, staring up at the sky. The grass was hot now against your skin, prickly and warm, nothing like the cool dampness of earlier. The sky was a deeper blue, harder, more intense. A few clouds drifted past, but they looked different too, more defined, edges sharper, moving with more purpose across the expanse. You might have closed your eyes and just listened, really listened, trying to capture the sound of Sunday morning in its final phase. The insects were louder now, their buzzing and chirping more insistent in the heat. Somewhere a sprinkler was running, the rhythmic shush-a-shush as it swept back and forth. A car passed on a distant street. A voice called out somewhere, too far away to make out words. Or maybe you got up and ran. Just ran, for no reason other than to feel your body move, to feel the air rush past, to use these last minutes of freedom in the most elemental way possible. Across the yard, around the tree, along the fence line, back to the middle. Not racing, not trying to accomplish anything, just moving because you could, because you were outside, because these were your moments to use however you wanted. Your breath came harder, your heart beat faster. You stopped, hands on knees, catching your breath, feeling alive and present and completely, fully here. The screen door remained closed, that barrier between inside and outside, but you could feel the magnetic pull of it strengthening. Soon it would open. Soon your name would be called in that particular tone that meant, for real this time, not just checking in. Soon you'd have to respond, to transition, to leave the outdoor world and return to the indoor one. But not yet. Not quite yet. You might have found yourself drawn to your favorite spot in the yard, wherever that was for you. The corner where the two fences met, creating a small private alcove. The base of the big tree, where the roots created natural seats. The sunny patch of grass right in the middle where you could see the whole yard at once. The edge of the patio where the concrete met the grass. You sat or stood there, in your spot, and just existed for a moment, not doing anything, not thinking anything particular, just being present in this place, at this time, in this moment that was somehow both completely ordinary and completely precious. The morning had been long, gloriously, impossibly long. Looking back to waking up, to breakfast, to cartoons, to coming outside, all of it felt like it had happened days ago, not just hours. Sunday morning had its own physics, its own relationship with time, stretching and expanding to hold experiences that should have required much more clock time than they actually consumed. And now it was almost over. Almost, but not quite. You could feel the weight of accumulated contentment, all the small pleasures of the morning adding up to something substantial, something you'd carry with you even after you went inside. The taste of breakfast, the feel of carpet under your body, the sound of cartoon voices, the coolness of the house, the warmth of outside, the texture of grass, the quality of solitary play, the neighborhood sounds, the call from inside and the return to outside. All of it layered together, creating a full, complete experience. Nothing dramatic had happened. No adventures, no crises, no major events. Just a Sunday morning, proceeding according to its own gentle rhythm, offering its simple pleasures, asking nothing in return. And somehow that made it perfect. The lack of drama was the point. The ordinariness was extraordinary. The freedom from urgency and obligation and schedule created space for presence, for attention, for the kind of deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you are, doing exactly what you're doing, wanting nothing more than what you have. You took a deep breath, held it, let it out slowly. The air was thick and warm in your lungs. It tasted like summer, like grass, like Sunday. You opened your eyes, if they'd been closed, or looked around one more time, if they'd been open. This was it. These were the final moments. And even though you knew you'd be back outside later, after lunch, in the afternoon, or tomorrow, or next Sunday. Even though this wasn't really an ending in any permanent sense, it still felt significant, because this particular Sunday morning would never come again. This exact combination of weather and mood and experience, this specific feeling of time and freedom and contentment, it was unique, unrepeatable, already sliding into memory even as you lived it. And then, right on cue, as if the universe had been waiting for you to have this exact thought, to reach this exact moment of awareness and appreciation, the screen door opened. "Hey, lunch is ready. Time to come in." The voice was cheerful, matter-of-fact, completely unaware that it was marking the end of something, the transition from one state to another. You stood up. If you were sitting, you took one last look around the yard, a quick 360-degree sweep. Coming, you called back, and you were coming, moving toward the house, toward the inside, toward lunch and afternoon and whatever came next. But you moved slowly, not dawdling, not defying the call, just not rushing, taking your time, honoring these final steps, these last seconds of Sunday morning. Your feet carried you across the grass, across the patio, up to the back door. You reached for the handle, felt the warm metal under your palm. You pulled the door open, that familiar creak, heard now from the outside again, the sound that had marked your exit hours ago and now marked your return. You stepped across the threshold. The cool air hit you immediately, raising goosebumps on your sun-warmed skin. You were inside. Sunday morning was over, and Sunday afternoon was about to begin. The temperature shift was always a shock, no matter how many times you experienced it. From the thick, humid warmth of outside to the artificial cool of inside, your body registered the change instantly. Skin prickling, sweat suddenly feeling cold instead of refreshing. You stood there for a moment in the kitchen, letting your eyes adjust to the dimmer light, letting your system recalibrate to this different environment. "Go wash your hands," came the automatic instruction. Not harsh, not even particularly attentive, just the standard parental directive that accompanied the transition from outside to eating. They probably said it without even looking at you, already knowing you'd be dirty, already knowing this was necessary. You looked down at your hands. Yeah, they were pretty gross. Dirt caked under your fingernails, grass stains on your palms. That general film of outdoor grime that accumulates when you've even touching trees and rocks and who knows what else. Your knees were worse, streaked with green and brown, possibly a little scraped, definitely in need of attention. But you didn't want to go upstairs to the bathroom. That felt too far, too much of a removal from this transitional space. So you went to the kitchen sink instead, the one your mum used for dishes and food prep, claiming it for this moment of personal hygiene. The water ran cold at first, then gradually warmed as you worked the soap between your palms, watching the dirt and grass dissolve, swirl down the drain. The soap smelled like lemons, or maybe just generic clean artificial, but not unpleasant. You scrubbed at your fingernails with moderate effort, getting most of the dirt but not being obsessive about it. This was Sunday lunch, not a formal dinner. Good enough was good enough. He dried your hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, leaving faint streaks that would probably earn a comment later, but not right now. Your parents were focused on getting lunch on the table, moving around the kitchen in that choreographed way that long married couples develop, each person knowing what the other was doing without needing to communicate. The table was already set. Plates, glasses, silverware arranged in their proper places. Maybe there were napkins, paper or cloth, depending on your household's particular customs. Maybe there were placemats. The specifics varied from family to family, but the general sense was the same. This was a meal, a proper meal, not just grabbing something from the pantry. Sunday lunch occupied a strange middle ground between the casualness of breakfast and the formality of dinner. It was more structured than the morning had been. You'd be sitting at the table, not sprawled on the floor. There would be conversation, not just parallel absorption in individual activities, but it wasn't dressy or elaborate. No one had changed clothes for it. No one was on their best behavior. The food itself reflected this middle ground quality. Not fancy, but not completely casual either. Maybe sandwiches, but good ones actually assembled with care, not just slapped together. Maybe leftovers from earlier in the week, reheated and presented with a little attention. Maybe something simple but satisfying. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, or pasta salad, or BLTs when tomatoes were in season, or whatever your family's particular Sunday lunch repertoire included. The smells were different from breakfast smells. Less sweet, less morning specific, more savory, more substantive. Your hunger, which had been building gradually outside, suddenly became acute. Your stomach responded to these food smells with genuine interest, reminding you that you'd been active for hours, that your body needed fuel. "Sit down," someone said, and you did, pulling out your usual chair, the one that was somehow yours even though no one had ever officially assigned it. Family seating arrangements just evolved naturally, everyone finding their spot and sticking to it through some unspoken agreement. Your siblings, if you had them, were already there, or arriving simultaneously. Everyone summoned by the same call, everyone making the same transition from wherever they'd been to this communal gathering. Maybe there was some minor jockeying for position, some sibling interaction that was partly playful and partly genuinely annoying. Maybe you were an only child and it was just you and your parents, a different dynamic but equally familiar. Your dad sat down, if he'd been the one cooking, or your mum, if she'd taken the lead. Whoever had been in charge of lunch preparation now got to actually eat it. There might be a brief moment before anyone started eating, not quite a formal blessing, unless your family was religious that way, but a pause, an acknowledgement that everyone was present and this was happening, and then, eating. The first bite was always particularly satisfying. Your hunger was real now, not the abstract or ignoble thing it had been earlier. Food tasted good, tasted right. Whatever had been prepared hit the spot in that way that food does when you read genuinely hungry, rather than just eating because it is meal time. There was conversation, but a different kind than the weekend morning small talk. This was check-in conversation. "What have you been doing?" conversation. Your parents might ask about your morning, what you'd been up to outside, whether you'd had fun. Their questions were general, not intrusive. They weren't interrogating. They were just being parents, showing interest, maintaining connection. You'd answer in the vague, minimal way that kids answer these questions. Nothing much, just playing. It was fine, not because you were hiding anything, but because, how do you explain to someone who wasn't there what it felt like to spend 3 hours in your backyard existing in that particular state of absorbed, timeless play? The words didn't exist for it, or if they did, you didn't have access to them yet. They'd nod, satisfied with your non-answer, and move on to discussing the afternoon. Were there plans? Did anything need to happen? Was anyone going anywhere? Sunday afternoons had their own potential structure, visiting relatives, running errands, doing yard work, or just more relaxed hanging around. But those plans, if they existed, lived in the afternoon, not here in this transitional lunch space. The meal progressed in a comfortable rhythm, eating, talking, pausing, continuing. Someone might get up for more water or to grab something forgotten from the kitchen. Someone might make a joke or tell a story. Someone might just chew in silence, lost in their own thoughts. You became aware, gradually, of how tired you were. Not exhausted, but definitely carrying the weight of the morning's activities. The combination of food and cool air and sitting still after hours of movement was making your body relax in ways you hadn't noticed it needed to. Your eyelids felt heavier. Your limbs felt loose, content to just rest in the chair rather than propel you around the yard. This was the Sunday afternoon feeling starting to emerge, different from the Sunday morning feeling, less open, less infinite, but also more grounded, more solid. The morning had been all possibility and timelessness. The afternoon would be more concrete, more shaped, more aware of eventual endpoints, but you weren't fully in the afternoon yet. This lunch was the bridge, the transitional space between one state and another. You were still carrying the morning with you, the grass stains on your knees, the lingering warmth in your skin from the sun, the slight messiness of your hair from being outside, the contentment in your chest from hours well spent. Your plate was getting emptier. You might go for seconds, or you might be satisfied with what you'd had. Either way, the meal was winding down, not rushing, not being hurried, but naturally completing itself. Someone would finish first, sit back in their chair, maybe sigh contentedly. Others would follow at their own pace. Plates would be pushed forward slightly, the universal signal of, "I'm done. Anybody want anything else?" Your mum or dad might ask, giving everyone one last chance before the meal officially ended. Heads would shake. "No thanks, I'm full." That was good. And then someone would stand up, start collecting plates, and just like that, lunch would be over. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, just done. The way most meals ended in most households, with minimal fanfare. You might be asked to help clear the table. You might automatically start gathering silverware or cups. Or you might be excused to go do whatever you wanted while parents handled the cleanup. The expectation varied by household and by age and by day and by 1,000 other variables. But either way, the transition was complete. You'd moved from outside to inside, from morning to midday, from solitary play to family meal. The rhythm had shifted. The day had progressed. Standing up from the table, you could feel it fully now. How different this moment was from waking up this morning. How many hours had passed. How much had happened. How you'd moved through distinct phases of experience, each one complete in itself, but also connected to what came before and after. The dishes would clatter in the sink as someone rinsed them. The refrigerator door would open and close as leftovers were put away. The normal sounds of a meal's aftermath, domestic and familiar. And you'd hover there in the kitchen or dining room for a moment, not quite sure what to do next. The morning was definitely over. The afternoon was definitely here. But what did that mean? What came next? What are you going to do now? Someone might ask, not because they needed to know, but because that's what adults asked kids after meals, part of that ongoing parental awareness of what their children were up to. You'd shrug, I don't know, maybe watch TV, maybe go back outside later. Okay, just stay where I can find you if I need you. The standard response, the reasonable boundary, the ongoing negotiation between independence and supervision that defined childhood. You'd drift toward whatever pulled you, maybe back to the living room and the television, maybe to your room, maybe just to a cool spot on the floor somewhere, letting your full stomach and tired body dictate your next move. The Sunday morning was gone now, truly gone, transformed into memory even as you lived through its final moments. But the afternoon was here, and it had its own gifts to offer, its own quality of time, its own version of Sunday leisureliness, different, but not worse, just next. The transition was complete. You wake up on a Sunday morning now, as an adult, in your current life, and the first thing you do is check your phone. The screen illuminates your face in the early light. Emails, messages, news, social media. The scroll begins before you're even fully conscious, before you've properly opened your eyes or registered what day it is. Your thumb moves automatically, trained by years of this same ritual, seeking stimulation, seeking information, seeking that dopamine hit that comes from novelty and notification. By the time you actually get out of bed, you've already consumed more content, processed more information, made more micro-decisions than that child version of you made in an entire Sunday morning. And you're tired. God, you're tired. Even after a full night's sleep, even on a weekend morning, when you don't have to be anywhere, you're carrying a fatigue that seems to have no source and no solution. A weariness that's not quite physical, not quite mental, but some combination of both. The accumulated weight of being an adult in the modern world. The morning unfolds in a fundamentally different way now. Even if you have nowhere to be, even if it's truly a free day, time feels scarce from the moment you wake up. There's an undercurrent of anxiety, a background hum of obligation, things that should be done, things that could be done. The to-do list that lives in your mind, never fully completed, always generating new items. You might try to recreate some version of those Sunday mornings. You might make a nice breakfast, put on a TV show, tell yourself you're relaxing, but it doesn't feel the same. The TV show is interrupted by the urge to check your phone. The breakfast is consumed while reading news articles or scrolling through social media. Your attention is fragmented, distributed across multiple inputs, never fully landing anywhere. And the time moves differently now, impossibly fast. You sit down with your coffee, and suddenly an hour has passed. You mean to relax for a bit, and before you know it, it's afternoon. Sunday mornings don't stretch anymore. They compress. They vanish. You can't quite figure out where the time goes. You're not doing anything. Not really. Not anything that should consume hours. But somehow they disappear anyway, dissolving into a blur of small activities and distractions and half-present moments. The concept of boredom has changed entirely. You're never bored now, not in that old sense of having nothing to occupy your mind. You always have something: your phone, your laptop, streaming services, podcasts, audiobooks, games, infinite entertainment, literally at your fingertips. You're drowning in content, in options, in stimulation, and yet somehow, paradoxically, you're less satisfied. Less content, less able to sink into any single experience with full presence. You're always aware of the other things you could be doing, the other content you could be consuming, the other ways you could be spending your time. The freedom of Sunday morning as an adult is different too. You can do anything you want, theoretically. No parents to check in with, No predetermined schedule, no external obligations, assuming you're lucky enough to have a genuinely free Sunday. You have more autonomy than you've ever had, but that autonomy doesn't translate into the kind of expansive, timeless freedom you remember from childhood. Instead, it comes with a weight of responsibility, of self-direction, of decision fatigue. What should you do? What would be the best use of this time? Should you be productive? Should you rest? Should you socialize? Should you catch up on things? Every moment of free time becomes a choice, and every choice carries the shadow of all the other options you're not choosing. You remember those childhood Sunday mornings now with a specific kind of longing. Not nostalgia, exactly, or not just nostalgia, something deeper, a grief, almost, for a way of experiencing time that seems irretrievably lost. You remember lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, completely absorbed in nothing. You remember the feeling of having nowhere to be and nothing to do, and that being perfect, being exactly enough. You remember time that stretched and expanded, mornings that felt endless, hours that held entire worlds of experience. And you wonder, where did that go? When did it disappear? Was there a specific moment when you lost the ability to exist in that state? Or did it fade gradually, so slowly you didn't notice until it was gone? You try to recreate it sometimes. You'll declare a lazy morning or a do-nothing day. You'll deliberately leave your schedule empty. Make no plans. Give yourself permission to just be. But it doesn't work. Not really, because you've changed. The way your brain works has changed. Your relationship with time has changed. Your capacity for undirected attention has changed. Even when you have nothing scheduled, you're aware of time passing. You notice the clock. You calculate how many hours you have left. You feel the pressure of the day moving forward, of the weekend finite and fleeting, of Monday always approaching. The timelessness is gone. Time is hyper-visible now, measured and counted and watched, never allowed to just flow unnoticed. And your attention has been fractured into a million pieces, trained by years of multitasking, of tasks, witching, of constant notifications and interruptions. You can barely focus on one thing for more than a few minutes before your mind wants to check something else, see what else is happening, find something new to engage with. The deep, absorbed attention of childhood feels like a superpower you no longer possess. You see kids sometimes, your own if you have them, or nieces and nephews, or just random children in public spaces, and you watch them play, watch them sink into their games and imaginary worlds with that complete absorption. No self-consciousness, no meta-awareness, no part of their brain standing outside the experience and commenting on it. Just pure, direct engagement with the present moment, and you feel that pang, that recognition of something you once had and can't quite access anymore. It's not that adulthood is worse, exactly. It has its own gifts, its own depths, its own forms of satisfaction. You have more understanding now, more complexity of thought, more capacity for appreciation and analysis. You can recognize beauty and meaning in ways that were unavailable to your childhood self. But something has been lost, some capacity for presence, some ability to let time be what it is, without trying to manage or maximize or optimize it. Some permission to exist without purpose, without productivity, without that constant internal pressure to be doing something worthwhile. You wonder if it's possible to get it back. Not literally, you can't return to childhood, can't unknow what you know or unlearn how the world works, but maybe some version of it, some way of relating to time and attention that recovers even a fraction of that Sunday morning quality. Some people meditate, some people go on retreats, some people deliberately disconnect from technology, create phone-free zones, practice mindfulness or presence or whatever term is currently popular for the act of actually being where you are. These practices exist precisely because so many people feel what you feel, that sense of having lost something important, that hunger for a different way of experiencing time. And these practices help. Sometimes in moments, you can catch glimpses of it, that state of timeless presence, usually in nature, or in certain kinds of creative work, or in rare moments of complete relaxation. Brief windows when your brain stops churning, when the to-do list fades, when you're able to just exist without agenda. But it's not the same as it was. It can't be, because you're bringing your adult consciousness to it, which means you're aware that it's happening, aware that you're practicing presence or being mindful, which creates a kind of meta-layer that wasn't there in childhood. You're observing yourself experiencing the moment, rather than simply experiencing it. The innocence is gone. The unself-consciousness is gone. The ability to be completely absorbed without knowing you're absorbed, that's gone too. And maybe that's just what growing up means. Maybe the loss of that childhood relationship with time is the price of admission to adult consciousness. Maybe you couldn't have both the awareness and complexity of adult thought and the timeless presence of childhood experience. Or maybe, and this is what you hope, on good days, maybe it's not a binary. Maybe it's not all or nothing. Maybe you can cultivate some hybrid state, bringing adult intention to the recovery of childlike presence. Maybe you can learn to let go of the constant doing and planning and optimizing, at least sometimes, at least for short periods. Maybe Sunday mornings can become a practice, a discipline, even setting aside the time, protecting it, deliberately creating space for unstructured presence. Not trying to recreate childhood exactly, but honoring what was valuable in it, making room for that quality of experience in your adult life. It would require real effort, real commitment, going against the grain of everything modern life teaches you, resisting the pull of your phone, the lure of productivity, the anxiety about time passing, choosing presence over optimization, choosing being over doing. And maybe it wouldn't feel exactly like those childhood Sunday mornings. Maybe it couldn't, but maybe it would be its own thing, an adult version of that same impulse toward spaciousness and presence and unhurried time. Not a return, but a reimagining. Not recovery, but creation of something new that honors what was lost while acknowledging what has changed. Because the longing itself means something. The fact that you remember those mornings, that you miss them, that you're rereading about them right now and feeling that tug of recognition and loss, that means something. It means those experiences mattered. They shaped you. They gave you a baseline for what human time can feel like, what presence and contentment and unself-conscious being feel like. And even if you can't fully recapture that state, you carry it with you. It lives in you as memory, as standard, as aspiration. It's why you feel the wrongness of your current relationship with time, why you sense that something important has been traded away, why you keep looking for ways to slow down, unplug, disconnect, return to something more human-scaled and human-paced. Those Sunday mornings weren't just pleasant childhood experiences. They were a form of training, a kind of education in what it means to be present, to exist without urgency, to let time be generous instead of scarce. You learn something then that you still know, somewhere deep in your being, even if you've temporarily lost the ability to practice it. And maybe, remembering is the first step toward recovering something, not the exact thing that was lost, but something related, something that acknowledges the loss, while also recognizing that you're not powerless, that even as an adult, even with all your obligations and anxieties and fragmented attention, you still have choices. You can still create space. You can still practice presence. You can still, at least sometimes, let a Sunday morning stretch. It won't be the same. It can't be. But it could be something worthwhile, something that reconnects you, however tenuously, to that child who could spend 3 hours in a backyard and have it feel like forever. That child is still in there, still knows how it feels to let time expand, still remembers what it's like to be completely, unself-consciously present. And maybe, just maybe, with intention and practice and genuine commitment, you can give that child self a little more space to breathe, a little more time to play, a little more Sunday morning. So here we are, at the end of this exploration, having walked through an entire Sunday morning step by step, moment by moment, from that first gentle awakening to the final bite of lunch, from the soft carpet beneath your body to the warm grass beneath your feet, from the glow of the television to the brightness of the outdoor sun. And maybe, in reading this, you've felt it again, even if just for a moment, that quality of time, that sense of spaciousness, that permission to simply be, because that's what those Sunday mornings were really about, wasn't it? Not the cartoons themselves, not the specific foods, not even the particular activities. Those were just the container. The content was something else entirely. It was permission. Permission to move slowly. Permission to do nothing. Permission to let your attention wander wherever it wanted to go. Permission to be bored and let that boredom transform into something else. Curiosity, creativity, contentment. Permission to exist without justifying your existence through productivity or achievement or purpose. You were allowed, in those mornings, to simply be human, to be a body in space, a consciousness in time, a small being in a large world, not required to prove anything or accomplish anything or become anything other than what you already were. And your body knew this, even if your mind couldn't articulate it. Your nervous system understood that you were safe, that time was abundant, that nothing urgent was required of you. You could operate in parasympathetic mode, rest and digest, rather than fight or flight. You could let your guard down completely. This is rare. This is precious. This is, for many people, increasingly rare as childhood gives way to adolescence, and adolescence to adulthood. But what's important to understand. Those mornings weren't just pleasant experiences that happened to you. They shaped you. They taught you something fundamental about what it means to be human, about what human time can feel like when it's not compressed and scheduled and optimized. They gave you a baseline, a reference point, a felt sense of what presence and spaciousness and unself-conscious being feel like. And that baseline is still in you, even if you haven't felt it in years, even if your current life seems to exist at a completely different pace, in a completely different relationship with time. Even if you've forgotten what it feels like to have a morning stretch out endlessly before you, it's still there, filed away in your cellular memory, your muscle memory, your nervous system's deep understanding of what safety and spaciousness feel like. And you can access it, maybe not all the time, maybe not easily, but it's not gone, it's dormant, perhaps buried under layers of adult responsibility and anxiety and urgency, but not gone. The longing you feel when you remember those mornings, that's not just nostalgia, it's recognition. Your body and mind remembering what they're capable of, what they were designed for. Humans aren't meant to exist in constant urgency, in perpetual doing mode, in endless acceleration. We're meant for both, for doing and being, for urgency and ease, for focus and diffusion, for productivity and presence. Those Sunday mornings taught you the being side of that equation. And even if you've spent years developing the doing side, because adulthood requires it, because modern life demands it, the being side isn't lost. It's just neglected, unpracticed, forgotten. But you can practice it again, not by trying to recreate childhood. You can't go back, and honestly, you wouldn't want to. You know things now that make life richer, deeper, more meaningful. You have capacities for love and understanding and appreciation that your child self couldn't access. But you can bring intentionality to recovery. You can create space deliberately, consciously, with effort at first, for unstructured time, for undirected attention, for presence without purpose. You can protect Sunday mornings, or whatever time works for you, as sacred space. Not religious sacred, necessarily, but sacred in the sense of set apart, honored, protected from the encroachment of urgency and productivity. You can turn off your phone, not forever, not as some kind of puritanical rejection of technology, but sometimes, for a few hours, for a morning, creating a boundary between you and the infinite demands of the connected world. You can sit with boredom when it arises, instead of immediately reaching for distraction. Let it be there. Let it transform. Rediscover what happens when you don't immediately fill every empty moment with stimulation. You can practice attention, real attention, sustained attention, the kind that sinks into something and stays there. Reading a book without checking your phone, watching the sky without documenting it, playing with a child without half your mind on other things, eating a meal without simultaneously consuming content. You can move slowly on purpose, not because you have to, but because you choose to, making slowness a practice, a gift you give yourself, a rebellion against the constant pressure to accelerate. And here's what's beautiful. When you do these things, when you create even small pockets of spacious time, your body remembers. Your nervous system recognizes this state. It knows how to be here. It's been here before. Those Sunday mornings aren't just memories. They're training. They're proof that you're capable of this different relationship with time. They're evidence that it's possible, that you've done it before, that you can do it again. And when you do, even for moments, even imperfectly, you're not just being nostalgic. You're not just indulging in a sentimental longing for the past. You're practicing being fully human. You're honoring a deep need that doesn't go away just because you've grown up. You're giving yourself something essential that modern life tries to convince you is optional or impossible. It's not optional. It's not impossible. It might be difficult. It might require real effort and intention and protection of boundaries. It might mean disappointing people or saying no to things or accepting that you can't do everything. But it's not impossible. And it matters. God, it matters. Because the alternative, a life lived entirely in urgency, in constant doing, in perpetual acceleration, that's not sustainable. That's not health. That's not thriving. That's survival mode, extended indefinitely, until your body and mind start breaking down under the strain. Those Sunday mornings were teaching you something crucial, that you deserve rest, not as a reward for productivity, but as a fundamental human need, that time can be generous, that presence is possible, that you are enough, just as you are, without doing anything. And maybe, as you remember those mornings, as you feel that longing, as you recognize what's been lost, you can also feel something else, a gentle invitation, a quiet calling back to something important, not backward. You can't go backward, but toward a different way of being, toward a more balanced relationship with time, toward the recovery of something precious that got buried under years of acceleration and urgency. Your younger self knew something important, knew it in their bones, in their nervous system, in the way they could lie on the floor for an hour and have it feel perfect. And that knowing is still available to you, still there, waiting, ready to be remembered, practiced, brought back into your life in whatever form makes sense for who you are now. So maybe this is your invitation. Maybe reading about those Sunday mornings isn't just a pleasant trip down memory lane. Maybe it's a wake-up call, a reminder, a recognition that something essential has been neglected and needs attention. You can't recreate childhood, but you can honor what was valuable in it. You can make space for presence. You can protect time for being. You can practice the art of letting mornings stretch. Not every morning, not perfectly, not without effort, but sometimes, in moments, with intention. And those moments matter. They're not frivolous or indulgent or wasteful. They're essential. They're what makes the doing sustainable. They're what keeps you human instead of becoming just another productivity machine. Those Sunday mornings, they weren't just about childhood. They were about being human, about what humans need, about how we're meant to exist, at least some of the time. And you still need that. You still deserve that. You are still capable of that. The only question is, will you give yourself permission? The permission to slow down, to do nothing, to let time expand, to be present without purpose, to exist without justifying your existence through constant productivity. That child on the floor, staring at the ceiling, completely content with nothing. That child is still in you, still knows how, still remembers, and they're waiting patiently, hopefully, ready to show you, whenever you're ready, that it's still possible. That those mornings weren't just a childhood luxury. They were practice for a way of being that you need now more than ever. So here's to Sunday mornings, past and present and future. Here's to the ones you remember with that sweet, aching nostalgia. Here's to the ones you're living now, perhaps imperfectly, perhaps in fragments, but living nonetheless. And here's to the ones yet to come. The ones you'll create, with intention and protection and gentle rebellion against the acceleration of modern life. They're waiting for you, and you're ready for them. You've always been ready, because somewhere deep inside, you still remember exactly what it feels like when a morning lasts forever. And that memory, that's not just nostalgia, that's a promise, that's a path back to yourself. That's a reminder that time can be generous, that presence is possible, that you are enough. Welcome home to Sunday morning. You never really left, you just forgot for a while. But now you remember, and that changes everything. The end is also a beginning.